That's Mr. Depp on the plane, but he expects you to believe him that he didn't have anything to drink on that plane except for maybe one thing of champagne. That's what he expects you to believe. He's talked about blackouts. These blackouts where he doesn't remember what happened. He blamed them only on opiates, but we know they happen throughout, where he doesn't remember what's happened. As you're weighing the evidence, as you're assessing whether Mr. Depp has borne his burden of proof, think to yourself, do you believe Amber's account of what happened on the plane, or do you believe that person's account that you just heard? But actually, you can look at his account from a few days later, May 30th, in which he told, again, Paul Bettany, he said, drank all night before I picked Amber up to fly to LA. No food for days, powders, half a bottle of whiskey, 1,000 Red Bulls and vodkas, pills, 2 bottles of champagne, and what do you get? An angry aggro engine in a fucking blackout, screaming obscenities and insulting any fuck who got near. I'm done. I'm admittedly too fucked in the head to spray my rage at the one I love. For little reason as well, I'm too old to be that guy, but pills are fine. And he expects you to believe that he's carried his burden of proof in showing that no abuse happened on that plane. You don't have to look at just that. You can look at this text of Patty Smith when he says, when I was in NYC, they were brief visits, and I fucked and charged by horrific fights with Amber. I fucked up and drank and got shitty, was so disappointed in myself. You can look at his text to Miss Heard the next day, where he says, once again, I find myself in a place of shame and regret. Of course, I am sorry. I really don't know why or what happened. Well, no wonder. You heard the voice on the plane. Of course he doesn't know what happened. But I will never do it again. My illness somehow crept up and grabbed me. I must get better. I love you and feel so bad for letting you down. And what his response has been throughout this trial to things like that is blaming Amber, saying he's just placating her. Is that carrying his burden of proof and showing that abuse hasn't happened even a single time? This is in the lead up to Australia. But before we get there, we can talk about January 25th in Tokyo at the premiere of Mordecai, where he did slam her up against the hallway wall, wailed on her, and he did get on her back in the closet. And what do they say? Look at her backless dress. She doesn't have any bruises. She testified herself that she was checking out pictures because she was concerned that there were. So now their theory is if there's no marks, it didn't happen. We all know that's not the case. February 2015, this is when they got married. The day they got married, you heard the testimony from Io Tillett Wright that where Mr. Depp told him, I can now punch her anytime I want and no one can do anything about it. He'll say it's a joke he made on his wedding day. Then we fast forward to Australia, where Miss Heard is flying from London, where she's filming The Danish Girl, to see her new husband for the first time since their wedding. And these are excerpts from DX 353, all but the bottom right one are in the days leading up to this, where he's on a drug-fueled bender. He's hanging out with Marilyn Manson. He's getting drugs from his assistants who are enablers. Again, there's a reason you didn't hear them testify in this trial. They're getting him drugs for days and days. And then the one on the bottom right, you'll remember you've seen a couple times. This is after he chopped his finger off, when he says, need more cocaine and ecstasy. So, and no one, Miss Heard was in touch with his assistants, but no one told her the hornet's nest that she was walking into. And we all know what happened in Australia. We all know that Mr. Depp, she gets there, he pulls out a bag of MDMA, and he took a handful. She didn't say he took 10 at a time. She did say he took 8 to 10 over the course of that period. The second day, Mr. Depp, who claims that Miss Heard refused to do a post-nup, calls Amber's domestic relations attorney, Michelle Mulrooney. You heard from her when he was drunk, and he fired her. And he told Amber for about the 25th time, she said, the only way out of this is death. I don't want a post-nup. And then she said she remembered him slamming up against the wall. And I won't go through, you remember her testimony from Australia. You remember her saying that he had her by the neck, squeezing her neck. You remember her saying that he threw her on the games table like a ping pong table. You remember seeing the pictures of that broken table. You remember her saying that at some point he had a broken bottle up against her face, and he told her that he'd carve up her face, that he was throwing bottles at her. He's throwing bottles one after another, and I could feel glass breaking behind me, and you've seen the evidence of that. And he was just over and over again smashing the phone into the wall, screaming at me as she watched it break into pieces. Now, she doesn't know how he lost his finger. She said that she saw him smash a phone to pieces, and you heard him get impeached the other day with his testimony from the UK, which was different from what he testified here, where he said he did smash a phone. And then they tried to put that picture in front of you with a desk phone and suggest that that was it. It's deception. They're trying to deceive you. And then you heard Ms. Heard testify that the next morning she found meat that he had left all over the house. But not before what happened before she went to bed that night. Where Ms. Heard testified, and I remember trying to get up, and I was slipping on the glass. I was wanting to move. I felt this pressure in my pubic bone. I remember just not wanting to move because I didn't know if it was broken. I didn't know if the bottle that he had inside me was broken. This is the next morning. This is what he wrote with the bloody stump of his finger. And there's been testimony about what happened to cut the finger off, but frankly, it's irrelevant to your deliberations here. Amber could have chopped it off with an axe, and it has nothing to do with whether or not Mr. Depp abused her. But we all know she didn't. We all know that his fingers weren't curled, and someone was standing with a half-gallon vodka bottle from about where that canopy is, and threw it, and it somehow managed to damage just the bottom of the finger and leave the nail fully intact. We all know that didn't happen. Mr. Depp knows it didn't happen, and we'll see some evidence of that. But here, he writes about her ambitions, starring Billy Bob and Easy Amber. We've talked about controlling, jealousy, talked about him not wanting her to act. Dawn Hughes testified how that is a form of intimate partner abuse. Here he's writing on the mirror again, and they try to blame her and say that she wrote "Call Carly Simon." She didn't write that. Who was the lunatic in the house? Who was writing everywhere? There's no evidence she wrote that. She testified she doesn't even know who Carly Simon was until she was told. This is some of the evidence. Mr. Depp told you a couple different stories the other day about the evidence on the right. He claimed that that was the handle of vodka between those two beer cans there. But then under cross-examination, he admitted it's not, that there's not enough glass on the floor, that there's no handle of vodka on the floor. But what there is in the picture on the right is evidence of when he was throwing bottles past Amber's head and breaking that plate glass window. More writing, more abuse on the right. Imagining having a painting area where you're drawing two canvases and you and your husband get in a fight, and while you are asleep that night, he takes the bloody stump of his finger and dips it in paint and destroys your paintings. Ladies and gentlemen, that's abuse. Good luck and be careful at the top. And this is a good chance to talk about Mr. Depp's controlling and jealous rage and his desire to control Amber's career. He didn't want her to act. As early as 2013, he tells his sister, "I don't need actress bullshit and her fucking ambition." He tells her in this recording,
if you look at the bigger picture, what is the
became irrational when you're doing movies. I become jealous and fucking crazy and weird, and we fight a lot more.
I become jealous when you're doing movies. I become irrational and fucking crazy and weird. Out of his own mouth. This is some of the notes of Dr. Blaustein, his therapist. Called him self-destructive. Something about wait up to fight the devil. Jealous. And I know this is hard to read, but you can see jealous. You can see paranoia, fear, envy. He wanted to control her. He wanted to own her. He didn't want her to have any career. And then he says things like, "I have other uses for your throat, which do not include injury." No one who hasn't previously grabbed someone by the throat would write, "which do not include injury." But we all know how Mr. Depp thinks along these lines, because you saw these two texts the other day that he sat on the stand and denied writing. And I'm not going to read them to you again, because they're the most vulgar, vile writing you can imagine. He said, "That's not my style. I wouldn't write like that." Of course he would, and he did. These are texts that he produced, that he gave to Amber and our team in this litigation from him to his personal assistant, Stephen Deuters. This is the way he thinks about women. This, not what you heard on the stand, that. It's disgusting. He admitted that he cut his finger off. This is evidence of him admitting to it to people other than Amber. I cut the top of my middle finger off. He says that to Dr. Kipper. Says it again to Dr. Kipper. The bottom one he says to Nurse Velati, I just chopped my finger off. But he does say it to Amber too. Remember, we played this one 4 times, and Mr. Depp denied that he was actually saying the day that I chopped my finger off. Let's hear it one more time.
I don't know.
I'm talking about Australia, the day that
Now we're talking about Australia. Okay.
The day that I chopped my finger off. So let's fast forward to March 23rd, 2015. After just a few weeks in Australia, Mr. Depp has a finger injury, no doubt about that. He comes home. He gets what they call a soft cast on it, which you heard his treating physician and our experts say it doesn't have sides on it, but it's a hard plaster cast over the top of his finger that can be wielded like a club. And they got in an argument when Miss Heard discovered that he was having an affair with a woman named Rochelle that had been going on before the wedding, after the wedding, and she confronted him about that. No surprise there, they got in a huge argument. At some point in the argument, he bolted up the stairs. Now, Travis McGivern claims that she threw a Red Bull can at him. She and Whitney Henriquez say that absolutely didn't happen. But even if you believe Mr. McGivern, at some point, Mr. Depp went up the stairs. He went to the fight. This is the man that claims he always wants to run, and this time he had his bodyguard with him. So he could have just walked out the door, but he runs up the stairs, and Miss Henriquez is standing on the precipice of the stairs, and Amber admitted that when she thought he was about to push her down the stairs, as he's grabbing at her and Amber with his free hand and trying to club them with the casted hand, that she said, I punched him square in the face. I punched him square in the face. And they showed you a picture of the shiner that she had, that Mr. Depp had. Miss Heard doesn't deny that. They're trying to say she's the abuser for defending herself and her sister from this animal who's running at them. This person that they claim couldn't possibly have done this because he had a hurt finger. Yet he could have done this. This is what Mr. McGivern said was rearranging her closet. I don't know what you all do when you rearrange your closets, but I hope it doesn't look like this. This is throwing a clothing rack down the stairs. This is knocking this over. This is what he did to rearrange her closet with his hurt finger that he couldn't possibly have hit Miss Heard with, they claim. That in and of itself, that destruction of property, even if he hadn't hit her that night, that's abuse. Imagine being married to someone and walking on eggshells so thick that you don't know if you set them off, if that's what's going to happen. That's abuse. And it's disgusting. But sometimes he would apologize. He'd say, I can't express how sorry I am for having stooped so low as to have spewed such vicious untruths for the sole purpose of hurting you. Grievous error, shameful. So he went in these cycles. She thought he could change for good. And when it was good, it was really good. But then sometimes things like December 15th came around, where she remembers him chasing her in the kitchen. She remembers him shoving her 2 or 3 times and sending her toppling over a Chase lounge and saying, do you really want to go again, tough guy? And she looked at him and he balled up his fist, leaned back, and headbutted her square in the nose and pounded her head with the back of his fist so she couldn't breathe on that bed that we're going to see in a second, where she was suffocating in this pillow top. And she said, this is when I thought I was going to die. He's going to kill me, and he doesn't even know what he's doing because he's out of his mind. And these are the pictures that they claim. I don't know what they're claiming. I don't know if they're claiming she painted on the bruise. Oh, you weren't hurt badly enough, so therefore you're making it up? Look under her eye. And again, their theory is that all of this is a lie. All of this was some grand hoax. If this were a hoax, ladies and gentlemen, she'd have worse injuries than that. She'd really do it up. She took pictures as they existed when she could at the time of abuse. And yet Ms. Vasquez has the nerve to say, well, why didn't she videotape an incident of abuse? What, as she's being hit, she's supposed to somehow grab a video camera with one hand while she's defending herself with another hand? You heard her in one of the audio tapes talking about when she hit him as he was trying to barge at her and she got her feet caught under a door as he's coming after her. And of course, as Don Hughes testified to, victims of coercive control like this, they do try to appease their abusive partner and apologize for things that aren't their fault. So as you're coming at me, Johnny, and you push a door into me, and I have to hit you to get away, to protect myself, yeah, she did apologize for that because that's the cycle of violence. That's what victims do. Yet they continue to blame the victim. There's no evidence she painted on that bloody lip. And again, if we're talking about a hoax, the next day she went on James Corden and they say, well, you can't see any injury there, so it must not have happened. She would have to be the dumbest person in the world to say, I'm going to commit an abuse hoax, but let's do it the day before I go on national television. Let's do it the day before. But you heard Melanie Iglesias, her makeup artist, testify in great detail, and I didn't even understand half the terms about makeup that she was using, but she testified in great detail about exactly what she did to cover up those bruises. The red lipstick that she put to cover up the busted lip. You heard the testimony of that from a neutral party who said exactly what she did. She talked about how she looked at the color wheel to neutralize the bruising. They claim it was just an accidental headbutt. Well, no accidental headbutt rips out hair. They claim, oh, Miss Heard somehow used a pocket knife to cut this portion of the bed out to stage this. Well, I don't know if that's a pocket knife or not, but the only testimony in this trial about a pocket knife is Whitney Henriquez saying that Mr. Depp carried a pocket knife in his pocket every day. We all know where that, if it is a pocket knife, where that came from. I think one of the most telling things about this incident is the text he sent to David Heard, Amber's dad, 2 weeks later, where he says, I meant to send this to you a week or so ago. I'm sending it to you now. And he says, I forget if it's a text or an email, but you can look at DX580. He says, yes, I fucked up and went too far in our fight. Because as a result of that fight and the bruises that all of her family saw, the family refused to go to the Bahamas with them for Christmas. The family refused to go to the Bahamas for Christmas, and on that trip to the island, Mr. Depp kept passing out, and every time he passed out, he would dump a glass of wine on Amber's lap. And she didn't like that, and she yelled at him. And because it was in front of his kids, he got up. This is the one where Tara Roberts took the video, but she didn't show you the closet, she didn't show you the bathroom. And Amber says, while holding my neck, this is in the closet, he said, I'll fucking kill you if you ever speak to me like that in front of my kids again because you embarrass me. And then he took her into the bathroom, and she said, but this time, he grabbed my vagina, shoved his fingers inside me, but through my bathing suit, and held me there and asked me if I was so fucking tough. And then she ran out of the house. And to keep him away from her, that's when he claims, and she admits, she threw something at him. She didn't know what it was. It's been testimony, it was a can of mineral spirits, that she claimed that hit Mr. Depp. And Mr. Depp is somehow the victim in that encounter? Come on. We talk about the train ride to Asia. You saw the pictures taken before they got on the train ride, where Mr. Depp has the same shadowing under his eye that he does in the allegedly abusive picture. But in that picture, he held in that train ride, talk about a honeymoon, he held her up against the wall while she was trying to get his arms off her neck, and he was squeezing her neck against the railway car. And at some point, I pulled the lapel of his shirt, he rips the shirt off, and she woke up with the shirt around her neck and a giant knot in the back of her head. Let's fast forward to her birthday party just very quickly. He experienced terrible financial news that night. He came over, they got into a fight. There's been conflicting evidence about that. But Amber said, I hit the side of the desk, he chest bumped me, he fell to the floor, I fell to the floor, and when I got back up, he held me down by the shoulders, and that's when he grabbed her by the pubic bone and pushed her down. And you'll remember Ms. Vasquez showing her interrogatory answers where she details a lot of this and saying, nowhere in there does it say that. And Ms. Heard says, it actually does on page 64. And pointed out to Ms. Vasquez exactly where it says that. That's abuse. It's sexual abuse. But we all know what Mr. Depp does when he experiences terrible financial news, or terrible news. He experienced terrible news that night on the way to the birthday party, where both of his bodyguards have testified that he was either visiting his sick mom or getting a birthday present for Amber. And then we know what happens the day after his mother passed away, on May 21st, 2016. And we're going to skip through a little bit of this now, and Elaine will talk about this in the context of the counterclaim. But these are the pictures afterwards. These are pictures that now they're claiming that, they must have been faked. There's been no testimony in this case that these pictures were faked. There's been no testimony that the marks you see on Amber's face, including this mark with a straight line from below her eye to the top of her temple that it lines up directly with a phone. There's been no testimony that those are faked. Mr. Depp went through the house. He destroyed pictures of her friends. That's abuse. Property destruction like that, in and of itself, is abuse. He destroyed her office. He destroyed her friend Rocky Pennington's preparation for the bead show that she was having. He spilled wine in the hallway that you'll notice the police denied. Oh, there was no spilled wine in the hallway. Well, even Isaac Baruch testified that he saw this in the hallway. And they said she never sent anything to her medical providers. These are the texts that she sent to her nurse, Erin Filati, the night that it happened. These are pictures of her in the courtroom. We're not going to play this right now, but you can listen to this. This is that terribly disturbing text of him in July of 2016 threatening to cut himself and telling, "You cut me or I will." You all remember playing that. It was awful. It was awful. I'm not going to play it again, but it was horrible. That in and of itself is abusive. This is the document that Mr. Depp signed, the divorce agreement, where he says, sign in agreement with his signature, neither party has made false accusations for financial gain. He said that then. He could have fought this then, but he didn't because he knew that her allegations were true. But then he continued his campaign of humiliation. He says, "I want her replaced on that WB film." Ladies and gentlemen, the facts are absolutely overwhelming of abuse. One time, that's all you have to remember. Mr. Depp simply cannot prove to you that he never once abused Amber. And if you don't know, you have to return a verdict for Ms. Heard. A ruling against Amber here sends a message that no matter what you do as an abuse victim, you always have to do more. No matter what you document, you always have to document more. No matter whom you tell, you always have to tell more people. No matter how honest you are about your own imperfections and your own shortcomings in a relationship, you need to be perfect in order for people to believe you. Don't send that message. That's what he wants you to send. So I'm going to quickly get to another point that you have to find in order to prove, or in order to rule for Mr. Depp. You would have to find that Ms. Heard made the statements with actual malice. Now, what Mr. Chu didn't tell you is that you have to find this by clear and convincing evidence. So this is much higher than the greater weight of the evidence standard that applies to the other claims, the other elements of the claim. Clear and convincing evidence is evidence that creates in your minds a firm belief or conviction that Mr. Depp has proved this issue. So if you believe that Ms. Heard did not act maliciously in writing her op-ed, then you must return a verdict for Ms. Heard, even if you think that he never abused her. But I'll quickly go over the evidence of this. The op-ed, you look at the words, it clearly wasn't a hit piece. She visited her attorney, Eric George, who testified by video that his objective was to make sure that there could be no meritorious claim that could be brought about this article relating to defamation. He gave Ms. Heard advice. She affirmatively followed all of it. So you cannot find that Ms. Heard met the clear and convincing evidence standard, given the testimony of Eric George, given the testimony of Terrence Doherty from the ACLU, when Amber went out of her way to ask her lawyer if it was okay. They will say it doesn't matter if she's lying, but even if that isn't, they will say that that doesn't matter if she's lying, but even that isn't true. Because again, keep in mind that if Ms. Heard wanted to be malicious toward Mr. Depp, the article would be very different. And I think it's interesting here, we'll talk about Mr. Waldman in a second, but that Amber utilized her attorney, Eric George, to make sure that she was following the law. Mr. Depp used his attorney, Adam Waldman, as an attack dog to defame Amber and to fulfill Depp's promise to her of global humiliation. The last thing I'll touch on before Elaine talks is Mr. Depp's damages. The man's at least consistent in one respect. He blames other people for his problems, everyone but himself. You heard us reading the stack of articles dating years before he broke up with Amber, before their marriage broke apart, talking about his problems, talking about the fact that his movies were flops, talking about the fact that he was late to the set, that he's unreliable as an actor. A word of reminder here, ladies and gentlemen, is that the only thing Amber ever did that Mr. Depp is allowed to sue her for is the op-ed. He's trying to say, I want to sue her for what she said in 2016. I want to sue her for harm that was caused then. You cannot do that. The only thing you're being asked to decide are the words of the op-ed defamatory. Nothing else. Any damage to Mr. Depp's career is self-caused. Then think about the testimony that you've heard from his former business manager, Joel Mandel, said that Depp had issues with drugs and alcohol that damaged his career. Depp sued him. His former agent, Tracy Jacobs, said he was late to the set and that he used an earpiece. Depp fired her. She said Disney never committed to Pirate 6. Disney's corporate representative, Tina Newman, said that there was no record in Disney's records of this op-ed. This op-ed had nothing to do with it. In fact, Katherine Arnold, our damages expert, testified that the paper version of the article that allegedly they say came out 4 days after the op-ed was published the same day as the op-ed that said that Johnny might not be in Pirate 6. The same day. The paper article came out the same day. So the op-ed didn't cause that. There's no evidence of any contract by Disney for Pirate 6. His agent, Jack Wiggum, couldn't identify a contract. His former agent, Christian Carino, said that there's no contract. He didn't lose anything as a result of this op-ed. Anything he's lost is the result of his own choices. You also heard him lie to you. You heard him tell you that this was his first chance to tell his story. But let's break it down, because that's not true. He could have fought the TRO that Amber filed. He could have said, I didn't abuse her, but he chose not to do that. He could have fought her in the divorce case, but he chose not to do that. Instead, he signed the statement saying that no one had falsified any statements. He only filed this suit after he met Adam Waldman, the same Adam Waldman who convinced him to file suit against his former business manager, to file suit against his law firm, and fire them, and blame them for things. But by the time that Amber wrote the op-ed, Mr. Depp already had had another opportunity to tell his story. He filed a case in the UK against the Sun for calling him a wife beater. And in that case, he had many of the same witnesses. He was on the stand for parts of 5 days, and he got to tell the fact finder in the UK whatever he wanted. Now, it's not the same testimony he told here, because you heard me impeach him about 13 times with this testimony from the UK. But he's had his chances. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to tell Mr. Depp that this was his last chance. Tell him to move on with his life. Tell him to let Amber move on with hers. Stand up for the freedom of speech. Stand up for the First Amendment. This trial is about so much more than Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. It's about the freedom of speech. Stand up for it, protect it, and reject Mr. Depp's claims against Amber. And now you'll hear from Ms. Beretta Hawks about the counterclaim. Thank you.
I get to say good afternoon. And I know you've been listening to everybody for a long time here, and I echo Ben's very strong thank you to all of you for this extreme service and extraordinary service. We really appreciate it. I'm going to go really fast and try to go as quick as I can so that you can get a break from us and go make your decision. I know you're probably itching to do it at this point. But this is very important to us, and we appreciate your listening, and we appreciate your being here. I'm going to stay on this slide for a moment, and there's something that's very important on this slide that hasn't been brought to your attention by Mr. Depp's team. When you see the actual damages, go down to the last paragraph, if you will. It says, Mr. Depp cannot recover damages for any harm that occurred after November 2, 2020. Do you all see that? So what Mr. Depp's team got up here and told you through Mr. Chu this morning has nothing to do with this case. He had his chance in the UK. The lawsuit was filed June 2018, 6 months before the op-ed. The trial was July 2020. The process ended, according to Mr. Marks, their expert, on November 2, 2020. And his damages stopped then. He can't get reputational damages. He can't get his legacy back for his children. He can't get anything after that day from you. You can't restore his reputation. You can't give him anything. They didn't tell you that, but the court told you that. And that's a very, very important thing here. He told his story. He had his opportunities. He had his full opportunities to do all of that. And he came in here and lied to you and said he's here to get his reputation back. It's just one of many lies in this case, but it's a really big one, because here we are, 6 weeks of your time, precious time, 6 weeks of this court's time, for what? For nothing. Only to go after Amber. That's psychological abuse. He's going after Amber for nothing, because he wants to put her through this again, the third time. So we're fighting back, and that's the counterclaim. She finally has said enough, enough. And we're asking you to finally hold this man responsible. He has never accepted responsibility for anything in his life. You've heard it this whole time. He hasn't admitted to anything. He's blamed everybody in the world, his agent, his manager, his lawyer, Amber, his friends, everybody. But he's never accepted responsibility for a thing he's done in his life. But we're asking you to accept, to make him accept responsibility, to hold him legally responsible for his actions, and to fully and fairly compensate Amber for what he has done by creating this concept of a hoax for the defamation that he has committed, that you have heard so much about, that just took wildfire and went off into negative media and has made Amber's life pure hell up to this day. We're asking you to do that, to compensate her, to be fair and hold him responsible so he stops. We don't want another lawsuit. We don't want anything else. We want to leave Amber alone and let her get on with her life and raise her child. So let's talk about the counterclaim for a moment. These are Adam Waldman statements. You've heard Mr. Depp say, well, why aren't you suing Mr. Waldman? Isn't that typical of Mr. Depp? He doesn't take responsibility for anything, so now he's going to blame his lawyer. But the evidence is very clear on all three statements, and we'll show them to you in a minute, that he says Adam Waldman, Mr. Depp's attorney, says these things. Now, Mr. Depp says, oh, I didn't even know about those until the counterclaim. Well, we know that's not true, because Mr. Waldman's testimony was 2 months before those statements were made. In February of 2020, Mr. Depp accompanied Mr. Waldman to the Daily Mail, the same place that all three of these statements were published. And he gave him 2 spliced audio tapes to try to make it look like Amber was the person who was committing the abuse. He went with him. He knew that Mr. Waldman was doing this. He knew that Mr. Waldman was launching a campaign against Amber to try to discredit her. And the timing of this, we're talking, the statements now are April and June of 2020. The trial is July of 2020. So they're launching an attack to try to discredit Amber before the trial in the UK. That's what happened here. And that is Mr. Waldman, but it's Mr. Depp. The judge gave you 3 different instructions, and you'll all have them. He's acting as his attorney. He has the authority. So Mr. Depp is standing in the shoes of Mr. Waldman. Mr. Waldman is standing in the shoes of Mr. Depp. Michelle, can you please bring up the first statement? It says, Amber and her friends in the media use fake sexual violence allegations as both a sword and shield, depending on their needs. They have selected some of her sexual violence hoax facts as the sword, inflicting them on the public and Mr. Depp. Now, what this statement is meant to imply is that Amber is lying about the sexual assaults and using them with the media to try to discredit Mr. Depp. That's the clear implications of this. Now, the first part of this is this contradicts Mr. Depp's claims today that the first time you ever heard about the sexual assaults that happened was in this case. It was in the UK case. This is the case that Mr. Depp brought in the UK. And instead of Amber Heard trying to put this out in the media, she did exactly the opposite. Now, this article's not in your evidence, but at least some of you will remember it being shown at one point with the title that said that Amber was successful in being able to treat her allegations of the sexual violence confidential in that proceeding. And it was treated confidential. She did exactly the opposite. She didn't want to tell people this. And you know that. You watched her on the stand. It was heart-rending for her to have to do this with the cameras, no less. But what else is false about this statement? It's that there was no false statements of sexual violence. Ben went through all four of them, and I will not repeat them all. You heard the testimony, and interestingly enough, you didn't hear any stories that differed from that with Mr. Depp. He didn't get on the stand and say, you know, no, this didn't happen, to at least a couple of them. And he can't in Australia. He can't remember anything, likely. But if you just look at the pictures of the destruction in that house, I mean, imagine painting those canvases and how long that took and how much hatred and rage you have to have for somebody to do something like that. Writing on the walls, tearing up her nightgown and wrapping pieces of raw steak and putting it all over the house. Remember that she also testified that he took her clothes and swiped them through all the paint before she left. You know these things happened. With respect to the malice on this one, you know he knows that he did these things. You know that he knows he was out of it for 3 days. And that's all that we need to prove for malice. But there's a couple of more facts here. But you can find whatever Mr. Waldman's done, and you can find whatever Mr. Depp has done. And both of those are the same for purposes of evaluating the verdict form. They stand in each other's shoes. When you have an agent, and that's what the jury instructions say, you can go with both. What did Mr. Waldman do? There was an article about the sexual violence that he had put from the April one that went into the trial. Amber's testimony, she was sitting near him in the trial. Adam Waldman threw that newspaper down in front of her defiantly. That's actual malice. And she was quite upset, and you heard her testimony on the stand about that. He was just inflicting it on her. Remember Bruce Witkin's testimony. This was Johnny Depp's best friend for 40 years until he testified truthfully 4 years ago about the drugs and alcohol, and he stopped talking to him. There was a couple of really important things that Bruce Witkin said. One of the things is he said he met Adam Waldman once. Adam Waldman said, "Do you have any dirt on the Mandels?" And he said no, and that was it. Then he didn't care. He is an attack dog. All he wants to do is attack and put dirt on people. The second thing that Witkin said that I think was pretty instructive was that Johnny Depp has deep-seated anger issues that have nothing to do with Amber. He remembered even back when Johnny was married to his sister-in-law, he had extreme jealousy even back then. And I think that's pretty significant. Remember, Mr. Witkin also was called in a few times to intercede in some of these fights between Johnny and Amber when Johnny would become so angry. The last thing I thought he said that was actually pretty important was that Kipper and his whole group are a scam. He said, you know, how is it that they can be sober doctors, you know, for these years, and he's never sober? You know, he's even taking pot all the time. How can you be sober? I thought that was quite instructive. But in any event, going back to, that's the first statement. The second statement, Michelle, if you can bring that one up. Oh, before I go there, I want to talk about a few more things from Mr. Waldman that you have in your pocket to be able to find additional malice with him. Remember, he's the one that after the UK trial went to the LAPD with a notebook full of things and tried to get perjury charges against Amber. The LAPD said, we don't investigate those things. But he then went to a German newspaper and said, Amber is being investigated by the NYPD or the LAPD for perjury. Do you remember that? That's malice. That's showing his intent to do harm to Amber. He also admitted that he speaks to that umbrella guy, and you'll see that one text in there from the person from TMZ. That umbrella guy is the big lead of Johnny Depp's, positive social media that is putting all the negative out on Amber Heard. And he also ended up getting knocked out of Twitter because he was abusing Amber. So now we'll go to the second counterclaim statement. And that is quite simply, this was an ambush, a hoax. They set Mr. Depp up by calling the cops, but the first attempts didn't do the trick. The officers came to the penthouses, thoroughly searched and interviewed, and left after seeing no damage to face or property. So Amber and her friends spilled a little wine, roughed the place up, got their story straight under the direction of a lawyer and publicist, then placed a second call to 911. Now this is May 21. Now, the clear implication here is that they're saying that Amber got together with her friends. They decided they were going to set Johnny up to be charged for domestic violence. And so they called the police, and they tried to make up this whole story, get him arrested, but the police said there's no evidence here, and went away, and they said, darn. And so they spilled wine, and they, busted up the place, and they called 911. They got advice from a lawyer and a publicist, called 911, and tried again to get Johnny charged. That's what this says. Now, we all know that's false, and it's heinously false. Because, after these events happened, and Ben talked about a little bit of it, but I'll talk about the rest of it, and I'm going to try to do it really quickly. But we all know Amber did everything in her power not to tell them who Johnny was, not to press charges, not to have him arrested. The exact opposite of this. But what were the facts of May 21st? He comes over. He's already been drinking. He's already high. And he is on a tear about feces in the bed from a month ago. And remember how Amber talked about when he gets into these drug-induced things, he gets into these paranoias, and he gets some idea in his head, and he just won't let it go. And that was his this time. There's somebody put that feces in the bed a month ago. That was his spin. So she gets Io Tillett on the phone. He's in New York at the time. He's going, they thought, this is ridiculous. Of course nobody did. And by the way, Boo has this huge problem. Of course it was Boo. He's always doing this. But Johnny just won't get there. So then they laugh. That makes him mad. Then he throws the phone at Amber. Amber screams out and says, ow, you just threw the cell phone at me. It hurts. Io says, Amber, get out of there. Johnny gets madder, pulls her hair, grabs her and starts hitting her. So Io gets hold of Rocky Pennington. She comes over as quickly as she can. She goes and gets in between the two of them. She puts her hands up on his chest. He pushes them down. And then she continues to stand in between them. And he's screaming loudly 10 times, Amber, get the fuck up. Amber, get the fuck up. Amber, get the fuck up. Loudly, loudly. Then his bodyguards hear this. They come in. They break it up. That's how that happens. But the next part of this, remember Josh Drew, and I think Elizabeth Mars was amazing in this one. Remember their testimony. After that, he goes and he has to, he always leaves a path of destruction as he's leaving. So he, bashes up things, and you saw Ben's pictures here on the picture frames, knocks things over as he's going, goes down the hallway, he's splashing the wine, he gets his bodyguards to let him into Penthouse 5. That's where Josh and Elizabeth are trying to help with Rocky's bead thing for the next day, and he comes in, storming in, and he says, get your bitch out of here. And he's got the big magnum, and he's mad. And Elizabeth is just terrified. She barely knows Johnny. She's met him 4 times, and she goes ripping out of there as fast as she can. And Josh gets out of there too. Then what does he do? He rearranges the furniture, or he might have knocked something off, one of the countertops or something. I think is the testimony of his bodyguards. But you saw the pictures. He went through and trashed that place again as he left. Now, the next part of this is the police coming. IO calls the police. He's in New York. He calls the New York Police 911. He's afraid they're not going to get there fast enough. He still remembers December 15 because he came in afterwards and saw all of the injuries on Amber and all the evidence. And he's terrified that Amber's still in there, the police haven't come, and that Johnny's going to kill her. So he calls a friend in LA and says, please call 911. We got to get somebody there fast. So she calls 911. So we have 2 calls, and you'll see the call summary. And the call summary shows those 2 calls really close in proximity here. So it's not them, we didn't get the first police officer, so we'll rough up the place and make a second one. You'll see that they're like 8 minutes apart up there. But it took 2 hours to dispatch the 2 different ones, and Amber never even had any idea that the second one was coming. The first one's come. And, we've talked about it. We've shown you the pictures. The police officers admitted that those pictures could very much have been what was there that night. Remember, Officer Haddon, it was his first week on the job. Officer Science was three years on the job at that point. They say, they told Josh that if she will press charges, if she'll give a name, we can file a report and make an arrest. She wouldn't do it. You did hear from Detective Sandanaga. That's the domestic violence. You recall Josh Drew saying that the police officer told him, she'll give a name, we'll make an arrest. He definitely said that. But in any event, she would not cooperate. She didn't want to. But Detective Sandanaga, their domestic relations or domestic violence person, said they should have done an incident report no matter what, even if they decided there wasn't a crime. Because domestic violence has the cycles, they come back, and it's good to have the record for the next time that it might happen. So she said they should have under the circumstances, even if they didn't. And she also said that when they put verbal dispute only in those calls, it is a code that they use, and you'll see that it's twice on that call report, so to say that's why we didn't write a report. But in any event, whether the police officers, forgot about it 2 months later when they were first asked about it, whether they just decided she's never going to press charges, and you'll see on the call report they're insisting that to the second set, it doesn't make any difference. The point is, this is still false. This statement is still false because Amber did everything but try to press charges against Johnny Depp. So they go away. And the testimony is that Josh and Amber and Rocky cleaned up because they have dogs, so they cleaned up a lot of the glass and the wine and those types. They had no idea the second police officers were coming by, and they certainly didn't call them, and they certainly didn't they never talked to a publicist. She did talk to a lawyer who gave her advice, and that's why she wouldn't tell them, anything. She said, I'm not going to cooperate at all. So the second one's coming. You saw that. You've got the video cameras in there, and you see there's no effort by them to try to get now these officers to press charges against Johnny Depp. Just the opposite. Josh Drew doesn't want to even let him in the place. They come through quickly. Everything's fine. They wave. Everything's fine. Are they trying to press charges against Johnny? No. They're not trying to do anything. They're trying to get him out of there, which makes this statement 100% false. Was it made with malice? Absolutely. There's nobody that thinks that Amber tried to press charges that night. Johnny knew that. But the other thing that's very helpful and what you should look at is Defendants Exhibits 772 and 773. Because once again, the next day, Johnny apologizes to Amber. He says in 2 different text messages, that's 772 and 773, he says, my profound apologies in one of them, and my apologies are eternal in the other one. What is he apologizing for the next day on May 22nd if he didn't know that he did all of those things? And by the way, remember Isaac Baruch even remembers the wine in the hallway. None of the police officers remember the wine. And that's because they're busy and they got a zillion other things going, and they didn't remember this call 2 months later when they were asked about it. So that's the next one. So clearly that's 100% false. Clearly they knew it. Clearly there's malice in making that statement. They're trying to suggest that she's manufacturing evidence with her friends to try to frame Mr. Depp. Nothing could be further from the truth on that one. And she did not want those police officers to press charges. Now let's go to the third one. Oh, and let's talk about the makeup just for a moment while we're going to the third one. This makeup thing, fresh-faced, natural. These were Adam Waldman planting these when he talked to the ECB people. You know, remember the testimony here. We kept asking, so did you talk to Mr. Waldman? Did you talk to Mr. Waldman? Mr. Waldman was trying to plant in all of these people's minds.
Objection, Your Honor.
Somehow, she wasn't.
Do you approach?
So I didn't say that any of the witnesses admitted that Adam Waldman planted that. I'm saying he planted it. That's me arguing the planting. And that's because it's all the same thing. She wasn't wearing any makeup. She was natural. She wasn't wearing a stitch of makeup. Every one of them says it. It's the exact same thing. Well, why would you say that? She's an actor. She's not going to go outside her house, you know, without putting makeup on. And if she has bruises, why on earth, when she's been covering them up for 4 years, why on earth would she not put makeup on so that she would cover those up? Why on earth would she not want to cover up those bruises? It makes no sense. But you know what? You guys saw her here. You guys saw it. You saw Amber on the stand. There were days where she didn't wear eye makeup. A lot of people think that she's not wearing makeup when she doesn't have mascara and eyeliner on. She has different looks, and some of them are with eye makeup and some of them are without. And people misunderstand, especially people that aren't that good at makeup, and a lot of men, frankly, go, oh, then she probably doesn't have makeup. And that's where that mistake happens. But you heard her testimony, and you heard her makeup artist testimony saying she doesn't go out of her room without concealer and foundation. She knows how to put these things in. And you saw Defendant's Exhibit 155, and you'll have the actual thing in there. That's the type of palette she used, and she was very adept at telling you what colors she puts on for the different days of bruises. This is a woman who for 4 years did everything she could to cover up anybody knowing anything about this abuse. Do you honestly think she's just going to walk around for the week with her bruises exposed? Of course she's not. Now, let's go to the third one. And this is the abuse hoax. He says, we've reached the beginning of the end of Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Johnny Depp. Now, obviously the defamatory meaning of that is that Amber's creating an abuse hoax. But there is no abuse hoax. I don't need to tell you all of the evidence because Ben did a beautiful job of just taking you through all of those different things, but I will point out a couple things for you. And that is, remember Bonnie Jacobs, the therapist. Dr. Hughes and Dr. Spiegel testified about Bonnie Jacobs' notes. And remember that I was holding that, you don't get to see them, but they testified that they went through them. Dr. Hughes testified that she also spoke with Bonnie Jacobs. She kept contemporaneous notes from 2011 when she first started seeing Amber. And the abuse is documented in those notes, is what Dr. Hughes testified to. They start in 2012, both physical and sexual.
Objection, Your Honor.
That Dr. Hughes testified to that.
All right, so what you are seeing is another sidebar conference. Usually these are pretty quick because the judge usually instructs the jury that anything the lawyers say in openings and closings is not evidence. Typically, the common practice is that lawyers don't want to object too much on either side, give free latitude for the other side to make its arguments based on what the evidence is, unless they feel that it is so prejudicial and so out of line that it has the capacity to taint the jury. So as you've seen, we've had a couple of instances where we've had a couple of short sidebars. Typically, the judge is like, look, it's not evidence. I've already instructed the jury that what you say is not evidence. Their recollection of what the testimony, the exhibits that have been introduced is what they are to consider, so they can account for or discount anything that the lawyers say. But, you know, interestingly, in this particular situation, we see that the judge has finished their ruling and the lawyer is back arguing before the court. So let's go live.
As reflecting both contemporaneous physical abuse and sexual abuse throughout that time period. Dr. Spiegel confirmed that later and said the same. When I asked Dr. Curry if she had reviewed those notes, she said yes, but she had no comment and she didn't
Your Honor,
deny
objection.
that was in there. Confirmed that he had reviewed Bonnie Jacobs' notes as well. And when I asked Dr. Curry, she said she had reviewed them, but she had no comment, but she also didn't deny that those were in there. Amber Heard testified that she went back, and because of Bonnie Jacobs' notes, she realized for the first time that the abuse started much earlier than she even realized before. She always had thought that it had started in 2013. When she went back and saw Bonnie Jacobs' notes, she realized that it had started much earlier, and she was very embarrassed by that. Now, significantly, you remember that she testified about how she was first called upon to actually detail all of her events of abuse in February of this year. And she went through and took the notes, took photos, she took everything she had, calendars, everything, put it all together, and you heard about at least 64 pages of detailed accountability of that. And Mr. Depp's team has been able to not refute any of that. Remember, they tried to impeach her and say, well, you didn't say that. She said, yes, I did, on page 64. Remember that? It was a very, very difficult process for her because there was an awful lot of it, and she put it in great detail. Now, let's talk for a moment about the motive. They have said that she has created this whole hoax, and I think Ben's done a nice job of showing how that can't possibly have been. But what would Amber Heard's motive be for creating a hoax, or creating any of this, or making any of this up? That's a big question here. They call her a gold digger, right? But she obviously couldn't have done it for the money, because first of all, remember the testimony of Laura Wasser, the divorce attorney. She said that California is a no-fault state and community property. So Amber doesn't have to have an abuse. She could have divorced him for irreconcilable differences, for abandonment, for adultery, for anything. She doesn't need an excuse. And she gets 50% of whatever he earns during the time of the marriage, unless they had a prenup or a postnup. The testimony from Michelle Mulrooney was that Amber completely cooperated with the prenup and the postnup, but it was Johnny Depp who, and you've already heard from Ben, called her up and fired her. He didn't want a postnup or a prenup. So she's entitled to 50% of everything he earns during that time. Now, we have Plaintiff's Exhibit 936 in evidence. And look at page 69. It says how much he made in 2015. It was $43 million. Remember Mr. Spindler, Depp's expert, who said that he made $22 million in 2016. So you got $65 million. Amber was entitled to 31.5 at least. That doesn't include all the back ends from, for example, Pirates 5. She was entitled to that money. So she didn't need to say anything. She could have just said, I don't like you anymore. I don't like the color of your hair. I'm going to divorce you.
Your Honor, we're going to object again.
Okay, so we're getting another sidebar here with regard to another objection. And as a trial lawyer myself, the one thing I'm concerned about in doing too many of these objections is that it can sometimes have a poor look in front of the jury, like you're afraid of what's coming out. And a lot of times my experience has been at a certain point in time, the judge will just hear the objection and not go to sidebar and say, move on, objection overruled here. So, you know, it's one of those calculations you have to make and get a feel for when you're in front of a jury. Again, just because you can object doesn't necessarily mean you should be objecting, like I indicated before, unless it's something that you feel is so egregiously over the line that it poisons the jurors to such a point you can't recover from it. But again, by the same token, the jurors are like, well, you know, what are you hiding? And I think we saw that a lot in this case with the uber hearsay objections. You know, I do a lot of trial training, and I tell people all the time, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think that we saw a lot of that in this case, and it was probably very frustrating. It'd be interesting to speak to the jurors, you know, afterwards as to what their thoughts were about it. It's not only frustrating from a time point of view, but whether or not they took away from those objections that the other side was frightened or scared of what was going to come out. Okay, the lawyer is back up on their feet again in front of the jury. Let's go back live.
$7 million. What does she do with the $7 million? She gives it to charity, or she intends to give it to charity. Now, they make much ado about the pledge versus donation, but both the corporate designees for ACLU and for Children's Hospital said donation and pledge are interchangeable. You know, these are pledges. The ACLU corporate designee said you typically do pledges because of the tax benefits, and that's what she said. She pledged it over a period of time because of the tax implications to it and because she was getting paid over the time. Now, she started to make these donations, and you'll see that the first one was on behalf of Mr. Depp's business manager, Mr. White, actually sent the letters with the $100,000 for each of those. That was the initial ones. He was trying to take credit for those, and in fact, both the ACLU and Children's Hospital got confused and gave the credit to Mr. Depp, not to Amber, for those. Then she made payments to both, and Elon Musk also made payments to both for $500,000 each, which she didn't count to her pledge, but they helped those organizations. At the end of the day, she's made $1 million in payments to them, but then she got sued here and hasn't been able to because she spent $6 million in attorney's fees. That is unrefuted. She still intends to pay those pledges, honor those pledges, and she said that throughout, and I elicited from both the ACLU and from Children's Hospital, they haven't expired, she can pay them whenever she wants to, and she fully intends to, but she has to get out from under this first. Now, who would blame a woman for giving $1 million in charitable donations? Who would do that? That sounds like psychological abuse to me. Now, Mr. Mandel testified that Johnny Depp is not a charitable person, and he hasn't written any big checks for him. Mr. Depp got on the stand and says he does it anonymously, but Mr. Mandel would have been the one writing the checks, and he says that didn't happen. Now let's go to damages, because I promised you I was going to go pretty fast here. There's a few different types of damages, but one of the things that the court has talked to you about, she told you that because we have defamation, it's invidious, and therefore it's very difficult to prove these. And so these damages to business reputation, inconvenience, embarrassment are presumed. You don't have to prove those damages. And one great example of that is the testimony from Mr. Hamada at Warner Brothers. He didn't want to have to get in the middle of all of this with Aquaman 2. They haven't even released it. So he didn't read anything in preparation for his deposition. He didn't talk to anybody before his deposition. He said that he tried to do technicals and say, no, we never terminated her contract, but oh yeah, we did tell her we were probably not going to renew her option. And then we didn't change the script, but Amber got the script, and yes, they did change it. Then he said, you know, no, we never negotiate salaries, but oh yeah, we did renegotiate Jason Momoa's and Gal Gadot's. So he just doesn't want to admit to any of these things. But what came out in Hamada's deposition, and I hope you were listening carefully to this, was the email from James Wan, the director, and Jason Momoa, her co-star, who said they guarantee if they are in the film, she is going to be Mara in the film. Why would they do that unless they thought Warner Brothers was being unfair to her? And why did she get almost knocked out of it? Because of the defamatory statements. When they came out, they took on a life of their own. Ron Schnell, the young Sheldon, I call him, or the Doogie Howser, our expert on IT, took you through and tracked how they tracked the defamatory statements, the language from the defamatory statements, how that went through the social media and the negative social media. And it kept going and kept going. And he tracked all the way until a few months ago over 2.36 million negative tweets, negative Instagrams, negative social media's comments about Amber that relate specifically to the information that was in those 3 defamatory statements. It took on a life of its own. They started to get Amber fired from Aquaman 2. They have continued to this day. They have followed her everywhere. Everybody has stopped wanting her. L'Oreal won't use her, even though they've kept her on from that time. She lost 3 different opportunities that were being discussed with her. The most significant part of that, though, is that Aquaman was the biggest blockbuster ever for DC Films. It was the biggest. It was over $1 billion. This was her opportunity for her star. Even the experts from Mr. Depp admitted this was her blockbuster. This was her mega. But what happened instead? As she's going through, as it's coming out, and in that 16 months they were going, well, nothing happened. Yeah, lots happened. She had 3 different films she was discussing. She got the L'Oreal contract. She got The Stand. All of those things were happening because of Aquaman. And then everything shut down. She wasn't allowed to do publicity for The Stand. She wasn't allowed to, she hasn't been allowed to do anything for L'Oreal. She got shut down from her charitable organizations. She ended up not getting the Amazon movie. And then they gave her a hard time about Aquaman 2. And instead of the career trajectory of the other comparators, who all went way up, and by the way, all the experts admit that career trajectory went well for all the rest of them, and she's the only one that didn't have it. And the reason is because of the defamatory statements. So you have some very good information to help you on ascertaining those damages. Now, Jessica Kovachevich, and I don't know if you remember her, but she was her agent. She said, everybody just stop talking. The producers don't want her, the directors don't want her, nobody wants her. We just can't get the traction, and we should have been able to get the traction, and they say it's because of those statements. So Katherine Arnold gave you some good estimates on this, and she gave you a very good basis for it. And she didn't use Jason Momoa's or Gal Gadot's or the others. She used Amber's, but used those comparators to show that they got big movies, that they got commercial opportunities, that they got these TV opportunities. But she used the base that Amber had. So she used the $4 million from the Aquaman, that would be 3. She used the Stands, how much they got paid per movie. And what she estimated on those, and she went through those details, is that if you took that for the last 2 years and projected into the next 3 to 4, that it's between $47 and $50 million that she could have had, instead of her star being completely extinguished. And that's what's happened to her. The emotional distress damages are even more extreme here. And that is, Don Hughes testified extensively about the PTSD and what she goes through. And every time she's called a liar, every time these hoax things come up, everything, it causes her to relive all of it. She talks about the panic attacks, the nervousness, the intrusive thoughts, the nightmares, all of the sweats, the anxiety that goes through all of this. It's significant, but probably the most compelling testimony that you could ever hear was from Amber yesterday, and when she took the stand before. It has destroyed her life. This has consumed her. She's getting death threats. Her daughter, they're threatening to put her daughter in a microwave, for God's sakes. She can't get away from this. It's everywhere. This media, the social media that has just taken off, has just consumed her life. As she said, I'm a human being. No human being should be put through this. Now, Johnny Depp sued for $100 million, or for $50 million. And we sent a message back saying, fine, then we're going to sue for $100 million because look at what you've done to her. We're not asking you to give $100 million. We're asking you to just look at the damages in this case and just be fair and reasonable in whatever you determine by following the evidence and the instructions. But we do ask that you fully and fairly compensate Amber for everything that she's been through, both in terms of reputation and emotional distress. The very last point is punitive damages, and you surely have those in this case. We've asked for $350,000 for the punitive damages, and we would ask that you award that. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do, we still have rebuttal closing arguments, but I can guarantee you that the rebuttal closing arguments will be done combined within 45 minutes. But what I want to do is go ahead and let you have your lunch. And then after lunch, we'll come back in the courtroom, have the rebuttal closing arguments, and then we'll submit the case to you, okay? All right, so go ahead and have your lunch. Do not discuss the case with each other, and do not do any outside research, okay?
Well, we're almost there to the conclusion of the case until the jury gets it. I got two great guests with me, Dina, who's a law-and-crime legal analyst, and Katherine Lizardo, who is a trial attorney, and these guys have been covering this. Ladies, welcome, and happy Memorial Day to you guys. Thanks for being on the show.
For having me.
All right, Dina, I know you've been waiting around for a long time. Me and you have been dying to get in there and have some discussion about this, but obviously, you know, we recognize how important this is. We took no commercial breaks throughout all of it, but you had some interesting commentary offline about how you felt these summations have gone so far. Tell me, what are your thoughts?
You know, I thought Elaine there at the end was doing a very impressive closing. You know, I almost think that if Amber Heard wins, it might be because of that closing. Her command of the facts and her legal argument were impressive, and her narrative was so well done. I think for both of them, this was the Women's Day, I think. I also liked Camille's better in terms of her, when she brought up the certain allegations and then tied it to the evidence. I liked hers out of the two better. But so far for me, actually, Elaine's closing has been the best so far.
You know, Katherine, I've said from the beginning of this case, and I believe Johnny Depp actually made a commentary at one point in time that Johnny Depp won the minute he walked into the courtroom. And I'm not talking about a lawsuit. I'm talking about in the court of public opinion, kind of level that playing field. And clearly on the social media platforms that I've been looking at, he clearly is winning that day in the court of public opinion. That said, a defamation case is an extremely difficult thing to prove, especially for a public figure. And I'm interested in your legal analysis. If that jury believes in any way, shape, or form, even in an instance of domestic abuse, and I think that's why you listen to the lawyer talking more than just physical. He talked about the words and emotional abuse and not wanting her to go forward with her career, and that's another form of abuse. I think basically saying, you tell me, you know, when she's given this editorial or writing this opinion piece, she could be referring to those things as well.
Exactly. I think for Amber Heard's legal team, their strongest argument is to say that she was abused emotionally and psychologically, because there's no evidence other than Amber Heard's statement testifying that she was physically abused. But the jury can infer psychological and emotional abuse, and we can see that Rottenborn actually focused on that in his closing. But like you mentioned, the court of public opinion is different. So there is that legal side being tracked here, and there's the court of public opinion. And you're right, 100% agree that the moment he walked on that stand and testified, and the moment he got off, he already won because he was able to speak his truth. And we saw in rebuttal that he repeated that, I only wanted to tell the truth. And we see in Ben Chu's closing, he ended with an emotional statement saying the truth matters. And we saw and heard him almost choking, trying to get that out. And you can feel Ben Chu's emotion for his client.
Yeah, I mean, this is an amazing case, and if you want to add any more of the craziness to the case, there's tornado warnings out there. The weather is inclement. As you know, at the Law&Crime Network, we've had our very own Jesse Weber. I can kind of see him in the corner of my eye in a monitor there, and I also see my good friend Gene Rossi getting ready to tee up your questions when we come back from the break. As you know, we're taking questions from the audience. They've been amazing, and our guests will be answering those questions, including Mr. Rossi, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I'm Sean Sticks Larkin, and you're watching Law&Crime.
Hi, it's me again. Listen to this. Medicare Part C plans with extra benefits like getting money added back to your Social Security check every month may now be available to you in your zip code. Make sure you're not missing out. It's simple. 1, call the number on your screen. 2, they'll look up your zip code and see if you're eligible. 3, they'll check for plans with extra benefits like prescriptions, dental coverage, and the benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every single month. Call now.
I called to get everything I deserve.
I called to check my zip code for a plan with the benefit that adds money back to my Social Security check.
I called to check my zip code.
Check your zip code. It could be dynamite. Call now.
Call 1-800-595-8348. That's 1-800-595-8348 now.
The world's gone wild over bucket hats. How do you improve on the must-have headwear everybody wants? With breakthrough cooling technology. Mission is the leader in cooling and heat relief innovations, now engineered into a full line of stylish and versatile bucket hats. The coolest hat you'll ever wear. On the outside, UPF 50 performance fabric. On the inside, our exclusive hydroactive cooling technology, now with 50% more cooling power. Activate with water, ring, and wave for cooling up to 30 degrees below your body temperature in under a minute. It's like your own climate control that goes where you go. Conquering the great outdoors, looking fabulous by the pool, or even better on the town. Hard at work or hard at play. No matter how hot it gets, cool more, do more with Mission. Machine washable, chemical-free cooling that lasts for hours. Go to mission.com right now to get your own cooling bucket hat starting as low as $19.99. For a limited time, use the promo code below to save 25% and get free shipping on all Mission cooling and heat relief innovations.
Baby, you're a perfect 10. I wanna get in. Can I get down so I can win? I like the way you work it. No diggity. I got to bag it up. Bag it up. I like the way you work it.
I started Truebill because I hate paying for subscriptions I'm not using. Find something you no longer want? Truebill can cancel it for you.
Truebill is an all-in-one finance app that tracks and categorizes your spending and alerts you if anything needs your attention.
Download Truebill, the money app that works for you.
And welcome to a very special For the Record, everybody. I am Jesse Weber. We are here in Fairfax County, Virginia. I'm here with Gene Rossi. And by the way, you know, I should have needed a booster seat. I didn't realize this height differential when we're sitting. But we're right now not in front of the courthouse due to thunderstorms in the area. In fact, there was an Amber Alert that popped up in the middle of closing arguments. But that's what's happening right now. We are reporting live to you. That trial will be back soon. They're currently on a lunch break. We're live in the closing arguments for the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial. And during this lunch break, this is when we take your questions on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, email. Send your questions in, and we will answer them today. I'm not only here with the esteemed Law and Crime legal analyst Gene Rossi, I'm also here with Law and Crime legal analyst Dina, as well as trial attorney Katherine Lizardo. It's great to have everybody here. I'll start off with some questions. First up, we have from Leon1 Shrike on YouTube. How long is this break for? Till 2:10 Eastern. That's when we think that the lunch break will be over and the jury will come back in. Gene, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
This is from Stressed Potato on YouTube. Let's stress potato. During closing arguments, why hadn't Johnny's lawyers play Amber's testimony from yesterday admitting to writing the op-ed about Johnny for the jury?
You know, I don't know why they didn't do that. I think that's a very good point to counter the argument that was coming out from Mr. Rottenborn, that article really was a global comment about domestic abuse, and it really wasn't designed to affect his reputation, because that's what they got to show. It was designed to hurt and harm Johnny Depp. I don't know why they didn't play that. That's a very good question.
Yeah, because a lot of our viewers were saying that was a little bit of a slip-up from Amber Heard. And talking about again, we are going to take all your questions this hour, but to give you a sense of what you might have missed, here's a portion of Johnny Depp's his closing argument from earlier this morning. Take a look.
The mountain of evidence that Mr. Depp abused Ms. Heard is simply not there. What we have is a mountain of unproven allegations that are wild, over the top, and implausible. And you can't pick and choose which of these wild allegations to believe and which ones to disregard. You either believe all of it or none of it. Either Mr. Depp sexually assaulted Ms. Heard with a bottle in Australia, or Ms. Heard got up on that stand in front of all of you and made up that horrific tale of abuse. Either she's a victim of truly horrific abuse, or she is a woman who is willing to say absolutely anything. It is disturbing to think that Ms. Heard would make up the horrific tales of abuse that she testified to in this courtroom. But this case doesn't come down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp. This case comes down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp, Christy Dombrowski, Sean Bett, Malcolm Connolly, Travis McGivern, Starling Jenkins, Keenan Wyatt, Dr. Kipper, nurses Debbie Lloyd and Aaron Filati, Tara Roberts, Ben King, Kate James, Kate Moss, Dr. Colber, Morgan Knight, Morgan Tremaine, Officers Melissa Sines, Officers Tyler Haddon, Officer William Gatlin, and Beverly Leonard. What Ms. Heard testified to in this courtroom is the story of far too many women. But the overwhelming evidence and weight of that evidence shows that it's not her story. It's not Ms. Heard's story.
Okay, a powerful moment there from Camille Vasquez saying you have to believe that Amber Heard is telling the truth and everyone else is not telling the truth. We're getting more of your questions right now on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, however you want to send them in. I have a question from Tammy Japink from YouTube. Did the judge just tell Amber's team that they only had 6 minutes left? That is correct. So there are time limits here for these closing arguments. Amber's team only has 6 minutes left for a rebuttal closing argument. Johnny Depp's team, 39 minutes. That's exactly how we know how much longer these closing arguments are going to go before deliberations begin. Okay, Katherine Lizardo, I have a question for you from Declan Cooley on Facebook. Did Amber's team deliberately misuse the term malice to mean maliciousness? Isn't that trying to mislead the jury?
Exactly. I caught on that, and we were talking about that during the break, that when Ellen Redehoff actually used malice to show sinister, that's not what actual malice is in this case, because we're talking about defamation. Remember that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard are public figures. That's why the element of actual malice is included in the jury instructions. But actual malice means that you made the statement false, and knowing that it's so false and with such reckless disregard that it's tantamount to willful disregard of truth. But when she used it in her closing, she said, you know, that Waldman, when he threw the paper at Amber Heard, that's malice, that's sinister. That's not what malice is. And you can see Camille and Ben Chu talking and trying to figure out, are we going to object here or not? Maybe we'll hear that in the rebuttal. And they should put that in their rebuttal.
They really should. That's such an important term. That's really the whole case. That's why when we talk about defamation, that actual malice standard is so important for the jury to understand the definition, and it's a really high definition. It's a really high standard. Okay, so now I'm going to go to you, Dina. We have a question from one of our Twitch followers, Corporal Roll Mops. What do they object to in a closing argument? I read somewhere that this can be seen as unprofessional. So do you think Johnny Depp's side looks bad since they objected a lot more?
You know, I think that Elaine was doing a fantastic job. And I say that as somebody who I think that Amber Heard was probably going to lose her case because of how many inconsistencies she has. But the way she had the facts and the legal arguments, and I think Johnny Depp's team realized that. And they were trying to make sure that if she said anything, it was, you know, really held to a high standard. But that could have really backfired because the jury wants to hear this. This is their last chance to kind of hear an uninterrupted version of events. And it makes it look like they have to. It looks a little bit desperate, I think, the number of times they objected to her.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Gene, I'll throw another question.
Sure.
One of our followers from Mexico, this is somebody who tweeted us. This is from @AmazingAndy. Amazing Andy. I thought you couldn't object on closing arguments. Why did Johnny Depp's attorneys do it? Ola from Mexico.
I was just in Mazatlan. There's two reasons why you object. One, the attorney for the other side is misstating the law. The other reason is they're misstating facts, grossly misstating facts. And there's actually a third reason, which is nefarious. An attorney is doing it to put the other side off stride. And I got to say this. Mr. Chu made some objections that I thought were okay. They were overruled, as I understand it. But you cross the line when you make too many objections during closing. I make very few because I think it looks bad in the eyes of the jury. You're trying to hide it. And if I'm getting up to respond to them, you know I'm going to address what they said.
So that's a really good point, and now we're talking about what the response is going to be. Dina, I'll go to you. We have somebody from Twitch. It's Amia2837. Do you think Team Amber can actually do something with that 6 minutes that they have left over in the rebuttal? I don't think they can push anything out. Johnny Depp's team was smart with how they arranged their time.
And time has been such a big issue this whole case, and how ironic it might be if it comes down to strategy of literally just time. I mean, like I said, I think that Elaine did a really strong, closing, the initial part of it. So we'll see. I think it is going to hurt them that they only have 6 minutes. They're going to have to be really strategic on which points, and there's a lot of points to rebut.
And we're seeing reporting from, I guess, the camera that Elaine Brederhoff might have been surprised by how much time they actually have left. Maybe they didn't actually strategize the right way there. Okay, Katherine Lizardo. This is from @Tweak on Twitch. This is actually from Twitter. Why do you think Heard has what seems like an impulse with staring, posing to the camera? And have you ever seen anything similar in other cases? I've never seen someone stare with so much hatred and disdain. Also, what do you think of her denying smirking and laughing in her last testimony?
Yes, so we tell our clients to go ahead and make sure you make contact, right? But you can only do that to a certain extent without looking weird or nefarious or looking like you're smirking, which is what's happening here. I think you have to do that authentically, and it's not coming across authentic when she does that. And when she says she's not smirking, unfortunately, we see something like that on the air, and it's our interpretation of what it's going to look like or what we think she's doing. And it does look like smirking, or maybe that's her nervous way of showing her emotion. As we see, Johnny Depp sometimes would smirk or laugh too, but we see on the stand that when a very crucial fact that is emotional or hard to digest comes up, that he has a tendency to smile or smirk, and that's their tendency.
Well, they're both performers. We can't be, that surprised. I'm going to do a favor right now for one of our YouTubers. I mainly just want Jesse to read this name on air, Lucy Megapint. Are we surprised, Lucy Megapint? We knew where that came from. But Lucy does have a question. Are we on lunch or are we in deliberations? We are in lunch. There's still a rebuttal closing arguments. We're not quite in the deliberation phase yet. So, Gene, I go to you now. This is another question that we have. It's an interesting one. This is from Mira Knoll on YouTube. Are the juries allowed to talk publicly if they want to? I don't know the official ruling yet on what's going to happen afterwards, but assuming they are allowed to speak publicly, do you think that they should?
All right, let me do the second question first. I don't think they should in a high-profile case like this. The first question is, yes, in Virginia, I talked to a juror a couple days ago who was the foreperson of a jury I had in March and early April. So in Virginia, unless there's a court order otherwise, state jurors can be called, you can interview them, and they can run their mouth and do whatever they want. Even at the federal level, and when I was an assistant U.S. attorney, we could not call the jurors, but they could talk to the public if they wanted to.
It's an interesting question, given the high-profile nature of this case and, kind of what we're seeing outside with a lot of people having strong opinions here. All right, Dina, before we hit a break, I want to go to you real quick from Facebook. This is from Esther Matthew. Depp's lawyers lacked a bit of emotion during their closing argument. You think this is an issue?
Depp's lawyers? I actually thought that Benjamin Chu gave a lot of emotion there at the end of his opening. It almost sounded, the camera wasn't on his face, but when he talked about how he has lost his reputation and his name and mentioned his children, there was a long pause. And then after he spoke, it really sounded like he was choked up. And that was the very end of his closing. And then him and Johnny Depp embraced. So I actually thought that that was quite emotional for a lawyer during closing arguments, and definitely more than we've seen from Amber Heard's team so far.
And let's see what happens with the rebuttal closings after lunch. All right, we're going to hit a break. Before we do, want to let you know that we have not even a question, kind of a question for you, Gene, from Twitch. Garage 4618108. Gene, how tall are you, man? Too tall. Too tall is the answer.
Okay, I'm 5'10", and I wish I were 6'5", because I would have played in the NBA. 40/41, Bianchi.
You should have told them 6'8". That makes me look so short right now. All right, guys, we have to hit a break. We're going to take your questions, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook. Get them over to us, email them to us. We'll answer them on air. We'll be right back.
Are you ready for a fresh new bath or shower? Well, now is the best time with 50% off installation and no interest and no payments for 1 year. Hi, I'm Christina, and it's time to flip your old worn out bath or shower with Jacuzzi Bath Remodel today. Everyone knows the Jacuzzi brand. They're the most trusted name in water for over 60 years. But did you know they can install a gorgeous bath or shower that feels incredible in as little as 1 day? It's no stress and no mess with a lifetime warranty. Now let's talk beauty. You deserve to start and end your day in a beautiful space that feels great and is custom designed just for you. So call or go online now to see the Christina preferred designs like Canyon, Farm, and Urban. Now that's the total bathroom beauty that I love at a price you can afford. And how about safety? Like an ultra low profile, easy entry shower complete with grab bars and a custom design seat. You deserve safety and peace of mind without sacrificing style. Because with all the worries in daily life, taking a shower shouldn't be one of them.
Every time I stepped over my old tub, I worried I might fall. I don't have those fears anymore. Jacuzzi Bath Remodel gave me a gorgeous shower that's safe too.
I've been trying to get him to remodel that bath for years. I called and they did it in just 1 day.
And at a price we could afford.
With one call to Jacuzzi Bath Remodel, you can effortlessly transform that old, ugly eyesore into the stunning bath or shower of your dreams that you'll love for years to come.
Call or go online to jacuzzibathremodel.com now to get up to 50% off installation. Plus, ask how you may qualify for no interest and no payments for 12 months. And when you call right now, we'll give you an additional safety upgrade free. Go to jacuzzibathremodel.com or call 800-993-1504. That's 800-993-1504. Call now.
This is an important message for everyone on Medicare. Today we are talking about Medicare Part C, commonly called Medicare Advantage. If you don't have a Medicare Part C plan, call now because there may be plans with additional benefits available that are simply not covered under Medicare Parts A and B. That's right, there are people on Medicare but don't have a Medicare Part C plan, which covers everything in Part A and Part B, plus extra benefits in Medicare Part C. Here's the good news. If you're on Medicare, you can call call even if you called last year. We will check to see if there is a Part C plan available in your area with additional benefits. If you're losing coverage, moving, or new to Medicare, call to speak with a licensed insurance agent during the special enrollment period. You don't get Medicare Part C benefits automatically, so call now for your free 2022 no-obligation Medicare benefits review. Just call 800-827-1307. 800-827-1307. This is an important message for everyone on Medicare. Today we are talking about Medicare Part C, commonly called Medicare Advantage. If you don't have a Medicare Part C plan, call now because there may be plans with additional benefits available that are simply not covered under Medicare Parts A and B. That's right, there are people on Medicare but don't have a Medicare Part C plan, which covers everything in Part A and Part B, plus extra benefits in Medicare Part C. Here's the good news. If you're on Medicare, you can call even if you called last year. We will check to see if there is a Part C plan available in your area with additional benefits. If you're losing coverage, moving, or new to Medicare, call to speak with a licensed insurance agent during the special enrollment period. You don't get Medicare Part C benefits automatically, so call now for your free 2022 no-obligation Medicare benefits review. Just call 800-827-1307. 800-827-1307.
I'm Brian Ross, and you're watching Law and Crime.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Right now, we are on a lunch break in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial. This is the time that we take your questions on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, email. Get your questions to us, and we will answer them right now. I'm here with Gene Rossi. I'm here with Dina, Katherine, Lizardo. We're getting some great questions from our viewers right now. And by the way, as soon as we get a feed back into that courtroom with rebuttal closing arguments, we will jump live. Katherine, Lizardo, I have a question coming in from Facebook. This is from Mary M. DiGustino. When Mr. Rottenborn, who is representing Amber Heard, had said if Johnny Depp is found abusing her one time, she wins, he said that several times. Do you think that the jury really likes that when people do that? And let me also throw in, what do you think about that comment that if the jury believes one instance of abuse, she wins?
It's true by law that if the jury finds that Johnny Depp committed even one abuse, whether it's emotional, psychological, or physical abuse, that Johnny Depp loses his defamation case because it would be true. Again, the statement of domestic abuse has to be false in terms of him. In terms of whether the jury likes that, Rottenborn had to point that out because that's one of their strongest argument here. But again, there's that question as to whether or not Johnny Depp wins or loses legally with his defamation claim. Does that matter in the scheme of things for Johnny Depp? And with his rebuttal testimony yesterday, I think the answer is no, that it doesn't matter for him whether he wins or loses. What mattered for him was he was able to tell his truth, the truth, and his side of the story.
And I'll just put it this way. If you're going to re-emphasize a point, that's the point you want to re-emphasize. Jury, you just find one instance of abuse and Johnny Depp loses. I think he wants to keep repeating that psychological, mental, verbal, emotional abuse as many times as he can. So what we're going to do is we're going to take more of your questions. But to give you an idea of what happened with Amber Heard's side, here's a portion of her side's closing argument from earlier today.
But we've been looking forward to being able to explain to you what you're here to decide. Because I imagine for some of the case, it's been kind of unclear. What are you being asked to decide? These are the things that you have to find, and you have to answer yes. As Mr. Chu said, you have to answer yes to all of them in order to find in favor of Mr. Depp. So you have to find that the statement was about Mr. Depp, and you can decide that in the context of the article. And I'll get to the arguments that Mr. Depp raises on that in a minute. You also have to find that the statement is false. And we're going to look at the statements here. We're going to look at each of the three statements. And in order to win his claim, Mr. Depp has to prove every single element. And there's a concept in the jury instructions that you really didn't hear from Mr. Depp's side this morning, but you've all heard it, I'm sure, outside the courtroom, which is burden of proof. It is Mr. Depp's burden to prove each and every one of these elements. If he cannot, Ms. Heard wins. If he cannot prove each and every one of these elements under the burden of proof that's applicable, Ms. Heard wins. And there's two different burdens of proof that we'll get to. For all of them except number 7, the burden of proof is greater weight of the evidence. So you weigh the evidence and you decide, has Mr. Depp proven to you the first 6 elements? The 7th one, for actual malice, the clear and convincing evidence standard, we'll get to in a few minutes. But this is what he has to prove, and he cannot do that.
All right, so we're taking more of your questions right now on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter. I do want to, the biggest question I think people have right now is, why are we here? Why are we not outside of the courthouse? There are severe thunderstorms outside. In fact, there was an Amber Alert, kind of a weather alert, not an Amber Alert, kind of a weather alert that came on everybody's phone in the courtroom today. So we are doing the best that we can with what we have. Hopefully everybody can appreciate that Gene and I, we're trying to do everything we can. Gene, I actually have a question for you. This is from Nancy J. Williams on Facebook. Gene, how is it possible for Amber's team to assume they know what Johnny is sorry for? And how can that be considered admission of abuse? He's an addict and could possibly be talking about getting drunk and high, and he's ashamed of that. Shouldn't that be taken into consideration?
Well, here's the thing, members of the jury, the audience. What Johnny Depp feels is really not the issue. It's a great question, but we have to focus on this one issue. If in the multiple allegations the jury finds one that is true, and Mr. Heard made multiple, then Amber Heard wins. And that's all that has to be proven. And the other thing is, clear and convincing burden of proof for actual malice, that's pretty tough. So right now, Depp's team has a little bit of a heavy lift right now, and they better do a good rebuttal in their 39 minutes, or this case could go towards Amber Heard.
And again, Amber Heard's side only has 6 more minutes to make their arguments. All right, Dina Dahl, I'm going to give you a question, 2 questions. They're very similar from 2 of our followers. From Beck on YouTube. In your professional opinion, Dina, how long do you think the jury will deliberate? And also from Simply Sarah B, first-time chatter, first-time viewer on Twitch. We thank you for that. Do you guys think we will get a verdict today? So, Dina, I throw it to you.
Okay, great question. You know, jurors do like to give verdicts on Fridays, and they do like to give it before holidays because they've been doing this for 6 weeks. They want to be done with it. They want to go home. It is possible we could get one today. On the other hand, there's quite a lot of evidence to go through. Typically what happens when juries start to deliberate is they elect a 4-person and they take an initial vote. If they take an initial vote and they agree, or they all but one agree, we'll see something today. Otherwise, I think just a few days. It will not go that long, again, because they've been doing this for so long. One thing that can also come into consideration is the judge is not allowing any readback of the testimony, which would add time. So the jury is only going to be able to look at that laptop with the audio and video and look at their notebook with the trial exhibits, and that's it. They're going to only be able to talk about that. They're not going to be asking for any readbacks. That will shorten the deliberation time also. So yes, possibly today, if not a little bit into next week, but definitely not a whole week, I think.
Katherine, Lizardo, we're getting a number of people's questions about the time limits in this case. This is from I Am Tweak on Twitch. What's the purpose of the time limit, and why has it been prescribed? I'm even more curious after hearing you mention this isn't common, because I haven't seen it often either. And with Amber's team to have wasted most of it through the whole trial.
Yes, it is not common to see this type of time limit. We've seen time limits in opening statements or closing statements to keep them short, but not as to the entire trial. But you know what's interesting is yesterday when the judge and the lawyers were talking about the jury instruction, she actually made a comment about the time limit. She said, if you create a circle and ask people to just stay within that circle, they will put everything in that circle, which I think she was talking about the time limit, and they were talking about the time limit, that if she puts a time limit, they will get everything in within that time limit. That's very important. So that's Judge Asparati's strategy, and I think it worked. In terms of Amber Heard's legal team, they have used so much of their time, and I think they did not use it wisely in some of the witnesses that wasn't really that helpful, or with the objections and a lot of the speaking objections that they made, because I think those also count for their time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and that's what's kind of surprising about it. We don't usually see that. We don't really see it in the criminal trials that we cover here on Law and Crime. Gene, you have a fan from the Gaming Fox Z2 on Twitch. I love the tie. It looks good on you. Good sir from Australia. Everyone is asking Gene today. He is more famous than you today, meaning more famous than me. Gene is more famous than all of us, so I'm not surprised by that.
Can I quote you on
But I do have a question for you. This is from Obi Carbs 6 from Twitch. How important are these closing arguments? How important are these closing arguments and rebuttals? Does the jury get to utilize all the evidence on their own time when not in the courtroom to make their decision? So kind of two questions.
Oh, God, that's great. I always teach my young puppies, my young prosecutors and young attorneys, when you're trying a case, you always think about the final mosaic. What is the impression, the painting, the tiles, if you will, that you're going to give to the jury? And every minute of every day of trial has to go to that final mosaic. Closing arguments are when you present that mosaic. And all four of them have done an outstanding job because it's the last impression, the last painting you're giving that jury. They take those paintings into the jury deliberation room and they use the evidence and say, which painting matches the evidence? I love closings. I love them.
Primacy and recency, it's going to be the last thing the jury hears before they go into the deliberations. That's why today is so important. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll take more of your questions. Stay with us.
Hi, folks. Medicare Part C plans with extra benefits like getting money added back to your Social Security check may now be available to you in your zip code. Make sure you're not missing out. It's simple. 1, call the number on your screen. 2, they'll look up your zip code and see if you're eligible. 3, they'll check for plans with extra benefits like prescriptions, dental coverage, and the benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every single month. Call now.
I called to get everything I deserve.
I called to check my zip code for a plan with a benefit that adds money back to my Social Security check.
I called to check my zip code.
Millions of people have called the Medicare Coverage Helpline. Call, check your zip code, see if you're eligible, and get what you deserve. Call now.
Call 1-800-256-1761. That's 1-800-256-1761 now.
Why is everyone talking about Navage and nasal irrigation?
I am one who suffers from chronic sinus infection.
If you work in construction, you work around sawdust or any type of dust, you need to clean that crap out of your nose.
She snores.
We both snore.
The science is simple. Allergens and viruses invade through your nose, the body's air filter. When it gets clogged up, germs multiply and you can get sick. Nasal irrigation is an all-natural way to clean your nose. It's not a drug. It's more like plumbing. Navage uses powered suction to pull saline in one nostril, around the back of the nose, and out the other nostril, flushing out allergens, mucus, and viruses. Over 80,000 reviews confirm it. Navage makes nose cleaning easy, so you can breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and feel healthier.
I love this thing. I give it like an A+++.
It does clean out what's going on inside here.
It's nice to breathe. Now it's time for you to breathe better too with Navage. Clean nose, healthy life.
Fighting with your finances?
Yeah.
Save yourself the pain and let Truebill do the work. Truebill automates your personal finances by canceling subscriptions you're paying for but never use.
Who signed up for those?
Give your finances the fix and download Truebill today.
Nice.
Letting go of my diamond ring was really hard, but selling it for the best price was simple with Worthy.com. They evaluate your jewelry to help you understand what it's actually worth. Then they auction it to their network of professional buyers. Get more for your jewelry with Worthy.com.
I'm Dan Abrams, and you're watching Law & Crime.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We're currently in a lunch break right now in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial. This is the time we take your questions on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, email. Send them in. We will answer them on air. The biggest question I think we're getting is, Why are we in a parking garage right now? Why are we not outside the courthouse like we usually are? There are severe thunderstorms in the area. We're trying to stay safe. We're trying to be inside so we can get back to you, to the reporting as best as we can what's happening in that courtroom and outside that courtroom. Here with Gene Rossi. I'm here also with Dina, Katherine, Lizardo. Question we have from Christina W. on YouTube. Is the jury decision going to be live too? That is our plan, to bring it to you live. Whether or not Johnny Depp or Amber Heard will actually be in that courtroom is an entirely separate issue. They don't have to be there. All right, so Dina, I'm going to go to you. We have a question from YouTube, from one of our YouTubers, Look Alive Sunshine. Is it common for a lawyer to not believe their own client? In this case, if Amber's own lawyers didn't believe her, would they still be on the case or ignore their thoughts to do their job?
Okay, that's a great question. And I mean, we have public defenders who are assigned cases all the time, regardless of whether or not they believe their client. So lawyers definitely can take a case, even if they don't believe their client. What they're not allowed to do is put that client on the stand and allow them to testify if they know that what they're going to be testifying to is a lie. But otherwise, you know, in terms of private practice, a lawyer may not take a case if they don't believe the case just because they don't think they can win it. And as a lawyer in private practice, you want to be able to win your cases. I mean, certainly you can still take a case even if you don't believe them, if you think you can do a good legal job and win. But for the most part, I would say lawyers usually take cases and only when they believe their clients, just because if they can pick and choose, they would rather take a case they believe in.
And a case that they think they could win as well. We're getting a lot of procedural questions, Gene.
Yes,
a ton of them.
yes.
People are very interested in the process. So from Kimberly Belver on YouTube, from a juror's perspective, how is a ruling of stricken different than an objection sustained, you know, by the judge? How should the jurors treat these differently? Thank you.
That's a fantastic question. An objection sustained means I ask a question, how many times did you rob a bank? Objection sustained, that means that question is gone. When something is stricken, it's a witness says something or an attorney says something that is so prejudicial that those sentences have to be stricken from the transcript. They're almost the same. They're like fraternal twins. They accomplish the same thing, but they're just a little bit different.
Yeah, and you know they're going to get an instruction that not to take that into consider. Well, obviously the evidence that comes in, they're supposed to, but they're not to take anything away from the stricken, not to use it against the party. All right, so I have a question for Katherine Lizardo. This is from James Moriarty on YouTube. By the way, isn't that like a Sherlock Holmes villain? Anyway, James Moriarty. To Katherine Lizardo. Can the jury really take all the text allegedly by Johnny Depp as a reliable evidence? I mean, in the closing arguments, that's all Rottenborn talked about mostly.
They can, and it is evidence. We saw certain texts that were admitted into evidence, so they have to take that into consideration. Now, whether or not they will solely rely on that, of course they won't, because there's a lot of evidence here. There's video testimony, deposition testimony, text messages. Those are documents that you can rely as evidence. Now, Rottenborn actually used those text messages a lot because it's more visual and we see it. But I have to point out, he used the same text message that was at issue yesterday, where Johnny Depp said that he didn't write that. But yeah, I believe Angenette also discussed that yesterday, that it doesn't seem like that's something that came from Johnny Depp, that it was actually a third person in that text thread. So that was interesting.
Yeah, Dina, this is a question that we've gotten a lot this past week as we're coming to the conclusion of the case. This is from Amanda Canning on YouTube. Can either of them appeal after the verdict?
Absolutely, and they most likely will. You know, if they lose the case and end up having to owe the person money, they can appeal the verdict. And we know that a lot of the objections, especially, I don't know if you noticed, but the jury instructions yesterday, one of the objections that Depp's attorney really wanted to make is, I believe they wanted the instruction to say that the statement had to be false or that its implication had to be false, which is very important. If he loses that case, it could be on that point. And she said, yes, don't worry, we have that on the record. The reason why he wanted it on the record is that would be a strong issue on appeal. So definitely if somebody loses, they will most likely appeal.
Great question, important question. All right, Gene, I know we're signing you off very soon, so I want to get one more to you from Twitch. Opalaria wasn't saying the jury's decision has an effect on the First Amendment misleading and possibly scaring the jury into siding with Amber. The First Amendment isn't relevant to defamation or suits between individuals, only the government. You have about a minute.
I respectfully disagree. This case is in part on the First Amendment. I think Mr. Rottenborn did a very good job that under Virginia law, if you are exercising your First Amendment right about a public policy issue and you don't have actual malice, you have immunity from any lawsuit. So in part, I respectfully disagree.
All right, well, here's what we're going to do. So, Gene, I know we have to sign you off. We can't thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Beautiful.
But we're bringing in Angenette Levy, who is in the courtroom today. So if you have any questions about what that atmosphere looked like, maybe what the jurors' reactions are, throw those questions in. We're still going to do the live Q&A session. Katherine, Lizardo, Dina Dahl are going to stay with me. We're going to remain in this parking garage where we can stay safe. Stay with us here on Law and Crime. We'll take a very quick break, and we'll get to more of your questions on the other side. We'll be right back right after this.
I'm Dan Abrams, and you're watching Law and Crime.
Hi, it's me again. Listen to this. Medicare Part C plans with extra benefits like getting money added back to your Social Security check every month may now be available to you in your zip code. Make sure you're not missing out. It's simple. 1, call the number on your screen. 2, they'll look up your zip code and see if you're eligible. 3, they'll check for plans with extra benefits like prescriptions, dental coverage, and the benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every single month. Call now.
I called to get everything I deserve.
I called to check my zip code for a plan with the benefit that adds money back to my Social Security check.
I called to check my zip code.
Check your zip code. It could be dynamite. Call now.
Call 1-800-595-8348. That's 1-800-595-8348 now.
The world's gone wild over bucket hats. How do you improve on the must-have headwear everybody wants? With breakthrough cooling technology. Mission is the leader in cooling and heat relief innovations, now engineered into a full line of stylish and versatile bucket hats. The coolest hat you'll ever wear. On the outside, UPF 50 performance fabric. On the inside, our exclusive hydroactive cooling technology, now with 50% more cooling power. Activate with water, ring, and wave for cooling up to 30 degrees below your body temperature in under a minute. It's like your own climate control that goes where you go. Conquering the great outdoors, looking fabulous by the pool, or even better on the town. Hard at work or hard at play. No matter how hot it gets, cool more, do more with Mission. Machine washable, chemical-free cooling that lasts for hours. Go to mission.com right now to get your own cooling bucket hat starting as low as $19.99. For a limited time, use the promo code below to save 25% and get free shipping on all Mission cooling and heat relief innovations.
Suffer from pain? You're not alone. Omega XL can help. For years, Robin lived with severe pain in her ankles, knees, and back.
I had so much pain in my knees that stooping was not one of the things that I could do anymore. I just thought it was age because I've gotten older.
Then she found Omega XL, a powerful natural supplement. 30 years of research show it relieves joint and muscle pain caused by inflammation. It's small, easy to swallow with no fishy aftertaste. Omega XL, a unique extract from the green lip mussels of New Zealand.
The moment I started using Omega XL, there was such a change and such a difference. I didn't realize that it was happening until I was squatting down, till I was running up and down the stairs. It has revived me.
Why struggle with pain in your back, neck, knees, or elbows? Turn to the powerful solution that millions have trusted to relieve their pain and get their life back. Omega XL, the one-of-a-kind natural supplement that helps reduce joint pain due to inflammation. Join the many Omega XL success stories.
I found this product, and it's called Omega XL. I mean, I can't tell you how great I feel. I mean, this works.
Because I'm taking Omega XL, it allows me to live life to the fullest.
Omega XL has given me my life back. Omega XL works.
I want anybody who's having pain in their knees, their back, your joints, try it. I'm telling you about it. I'm telling you about something that's gonna change your life if you'll try it.
Call now or go to OmegaXL.com/Robin. And when you buy one bottle of Omega XL, get another absolutely free. That's 2 bottles for only $39.95. Order right now and we'll also include a bottle of Vitamin XL D3 for whole body health absolutely free on your first order. We're so confident in the effectiveness of Omega XL that we back it up with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Order now and get 2 bottles of Omega XL plus Vitamin XL D3 for only $39.95. Act now.
All right, welcome back to For the Record, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber. I'm here with Angenette Levy, my co-host, by the way, of the Sidebar podcast. If you want to follow anything that happens in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial, daily recaps, check out the Sidebar podcast. It's co-hosted by both Angenette and I. First, want to let you know there's a lunch break happening in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial. As soon as we get a live feed back in that courtroom, we will jump back live. We're taking your questions right now during this lunch break on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, email. Send them over to us. We'll answer them in the next maybe 10 minutes or so before they come back. First question that we keep getting is, why are we here? Why are we in a parking garage? There are severe thunderstorms in the area, so we can't actually be outside of the courthouse like we normally are. Maybe that'll clear up. Maybe we'll actually get to be back out there later on today. We're just trying to stay safe. But Angenette,
yes.
First question we have is from Kate Pace on Twitter.
Okay.
Please tell me everything about the jurors' reactions to each lawyer's closing, please, because you were in the courtroom today.
And that was in all caps, right?
That was in all caps.
Important.
All caps.
Yes, all caps. Okay, so when Camille Vasquez got up to begin her part of the closing argument, the jurors, she said good morning, and they all smiled at her. So it was very interesting. You know, I mentioned earlier she's wearing the white dress. I think it really makes a statement. It's very bold. So I think that they were really paying attention to everything she had to say. Other than that, they were pretty stone-faced. There were times where they were looking down, and I think they were looking at those monitors that they have there when some of the text messages were being displayed on the screen. Obviously, we saw the cupboard, the kitchen cupboard, or the kitchen cabinet video again. When that started playing after what we heard from Morgan Tremaine, I don't know if you felt it, but I felt a lot. Not that I ever really had a feeling about it. It was what it was, but it made me look at it a little bit differently, having that information about how it came in and with the copyright and how it was approved within 15
I don't know. It doesn't change the fact of what we saw in the video, and he didn't know he was being recorded. So it's, you know, that's the way I look at it.
The fact that he didn't, and then it appeared she tried to hide. She put the coffee cup in front. It's like she's trying to obstruct his view of
he wouldn't see it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like it seemed even sneakier and even more of a violation. You know, like I know you're engaged. You know, we've all been in relationships, and that's certainly not something I've ever done to any of my partners.
Well, hopefully I don't experience it anyway, as you know, I'm about to get married.
I'll talk to your fiance about it.
So we're taking your questions right now, but to give you, we're all wondering what's in the mind of the jury. Obviously, they're probably going to be considering these closing arguments the last thing in their mind, the last thing that they hear before they go to deliberate. But you have to also wonder, are they considering Johnny Depp and Amber Heard taking the stand? Give you a sample of this. This is when Johnny Depp was on the stand explaining and responding to the sexual assault allegations.
No human being is perfect, certainly not. None of us. But I have never in my life committed sexual battery, physical abuse, all these outlandish, outrageous stories of me committing these things and living with it for 6 years and waiting to be able to bring the truth out. So this is not easy for any of us. I know that. But no matter what happens, I did get here, and I did tell the truth, and I have spoken up for what I've been carrying on my back reluctantly for 6 years.
All right, Johnny Depp giving one final plea to these jurors before they entered into closing arguments. All right, so Dina Dahl, we have a question from Louise Sanderson on YouTube. I am from the UK, thank you for watching, and I am confused. If you have freedom of speech, how can defamation exist?
Okay, great question. So yes, it's a constitutional right, freedom of speech, but you cannot lie. That's the difference. You can say something that's true, but very bad about the person, right? You can say the worst things about your neighbor. As long as they're true, it's lawful. It doesn't matter if they lost their job because of it and people hate them because of that. So that's the restriction on the speech. We allow speech, but what you're saying has to be true.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it's an important distinction to make there. Katherine Lizardo, we have a question from YouTube from Blue Tilapia. I don't know if tilapia is supposed to be blue. I think it's supposed to be white. So don't eat it. Don't eat it. Everyone stay away from that.
Sounds pretty toxic.
Sounds pretty toxic. Katherine Lizardo, what happens if the jury is hung? Do you repeat the whole thing again in a few months?
Well, if the jury is hung, most likely before they even get there, the judge will give them an instruction to go ahead and go back and try harder, try to deliberate. But if they're hung, you know, not really. We won't go back here. It's up to Amber Heard or Johnny Depp what they want to do in terms of procedurally. But when they're hung, they're going to say that, hey, one of the elements were not really. Well, here let me back up. It's unanimous jury that's needed in Virginia. There's 7 jurors. It has to be unanimous. If even one juror says no, then in any of those elements, then whoever they say no to loses. It's either Johnny Depp or Amber Heard.
And Katherine Lizardo, you actually answered another one of our followers' questions about whether it has to be unanimous. All right, Angenette, I have a question for you from Twitch.
Okay.
Never enough kitties. There's never really enough kitties when you really think about it. How did you or the courtroom react when Rottenborn in his closing argument said the statement that if Amber chopped Johnny Depp's finger off with an axe, that wouldn't matter?
I was kind of like, really? It wouldn't? I mean, seriously, why do you say it wouldn't? I mean, it goes to the whole argument about, I mean, the whole, even though this is about defamation, they still have to prove who was the abusive one in this relationship, and who does the jury, they're saying, you know, he's saying this isn't about this and it's not about that, but it kind of is, because if Johnny Depp is truly an abuser, then, you know, he has to prove he's not for his case. And so when he said that, I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, it does matter. So I think everybody's actually been pretty tame today. You know, we've talked about this, how sometimes there have been some amusing moments in this trial, and you have to hold back from laughing because, you know, it's a courtroom, there's decorum. But I think everybody was kind of like, did he really just say that? So anyway, you know, I think he's, you know, I think he's a pretty good lawyer, you know, I really do. But when he said that, I think sometimes lawyers, things just fly out of their mouths sometimes during closings or even openings. And then
during life.
Yeah, during life, or like Angenette, like I'm the queen of sticking my foot in my mouth. But anyway, like, you know, we all say things where we're just like, oh, did I just say that? So maybe he'll go home tonight and think like, did I really say that?
Hopefully not when you're in a closing argument in a $50 million defamation lawsuit, but, you know.
$100 million.
Which, by the way, it was interesting. She said, we're not even looking for $100 million. We'll get to that in a...
That was interesting, don't you think?
I don't know why Elaine Britterhoff actually said that.
Yeah.
But, so anyway, first let me tell you, Angenette, you do have a fan. This is from Robbie Carb 6. Why is Angenette the best? Love her. You're cool too, Weber. All right. All right.
I must say the humidity is taking a toll on my hair today.
It's fine.
This is a hot mess. Jesse's super fashionable for the field.
What can I say?
That's just kind of like here.
I always have to wear suits every day.
But thank you. You're very sweet.
Dina, I have a question for you. This is actually, you know, a strategic question that we're dealing with because of the time limits that people have a lot of questions about. This is from Hello Kitten 1269 on YouTube. Sorry, my name isn't hedgehog related because I do like those names. But what would be the most logical move for Amber's team to really utilize the 6 minutes that they have left?
Oh, yeah. That's a great point. I think their best argument is that the statements were not about Johnny Depp. And we saw Rottenberg kind of allude to that this only had to do with how this affected her. And you know what? It's actually a pretty strong argument. There's a reason that she hired a private attorney to try to draft it. There's a reason the ACLU tried to draft it. They all knew a defamation was on the table. So I think that's their strongest argument. I would keep going to that whether or not he was an abuser is not what this is about. It's about the fact that after she accused him of it, she became a public pariah, which is true. She did become a public pariah.
Yeah, Angenette, we have a question from Joanna Gee on YouTube. Can the jurors ask questions in regards to any concerns or doubts that they might have? For example, why does Amber Heard's cup present in nearly all of the photos submitted as evidence? Can that be seen as pictures being a setup?
Ooh, that's a good question. And we actually, there are I think there are a couple photos. There may even be one of the bedroom next to the nightstand that has one of those infinitum Nile, I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, I think I am, coffee cups there. So maybe they just had a bunch sitting around the house. I don't know. But the thing that, and I hate to bring this up, but so apparently, and you people on social media brought this to my attention, apparently you can snort cocaine with a tampon applicator. Did you see that sitting there?
I also bet you never thought that sentence would come out of your mouth ever in life.
There are a lot of things that I've tweeted and never said on television until now, but hey, when in Rome, right? Right. So, but you know, I don't know if I really see Johnny Depp snorting. Is a man going to use a tampon applicator to snort cocaine? Oh, and I have news about you remember the box of cocaine?
Yes.
So apparently, guys, this is some news. I didn't put it out there because I was trying to get this story. There's this guy named Sterling Assault, and he put it on Instagram. He designed that box.
Oh, really?
It's for jewelry. It's for an eyeball pendant.
You know what's interesting is if people are watching the trial, they've been coming out and
there's all this stuff coming out,
people
right?
have seen it. Well, I'm forgetting Morgan Knight, who came forward and commented on it.
But they said he wanted 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah. Well, no, that was the TMZ guy.
No, it was both of them, wasn't it?
Morgan
and they both wanted to be. And then yesterday, Amber called it the Johnny Depp show.
That's right. That's right. Exactly right. Okay. All right. So I just got word we can jump live right now. We're going to back to the closing arguments in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial. Thank you so much for the questions, everybody.
Hello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Heard's counsel has mischaracterized the record multiple times, and Ms. Heard lied to you. They've mischaracterized the testimony of police officer Sines and Haddon, who explicitly testified that they saw no signs of injury and no property damage. They mischaracterized the testimony of Walter Hamada, who testified clearly that there was no impact on Ms. Heard's career at Aquaman 2 from anything said by Adam Waldman or Johnny Depp. And Ms. Heard's casting was delayed because of creative issues. They've mischaracterized the testimony of Detective Sadaga. They mischaracterized the testimony of Ronald Schell. You've been here. You've listened to the testimony. You know the record. Ms. Heard lied, and she lied again, and she kept lying. She lied 6 years ago on May 27th, 2016, when she walked into court in Los Angeles to publicly accuse Mr. Depp of abuse for the first time. She lied again when she told the world over and over again that she donated all of the $7 million divorce settlement to charity. You heard the evidence about what she donated, and you watched her. You watched her try to save her lie about that broken promise with more lies on this stand in this courtroom. She lied again when she told the world in her op-ed on December 18th, 2018, that she was a public figure representing domestic abuse, painting herself as a representative of abuse survivors everywhere, and painting Mr. Depp as a representative of perpetrators. She's come too far. She can't back down. She's lied too many times to too many people. So when Mr. Depp finally decided to fight to clear his name by filing this lawsuit, Ms. Heard responded by making up more and more stories of more and more extreme abuse. She came up with a new accusation that Mr. Depp had raped her with a bottle in Australia. And she keeps making new claims up even now. At this trial, for the very first time, she claimed that she had been sexually assaulted the night of her 30th birthday, even though she had testified repeatedly about her birthday prior and never mentioned it. And at this trial, she also claimed for the very first time that Mr. Depp was hitting her all the time during the first year of their relationship, even though this first year, she had testified previously, was magic and bliss, with absolutely no violence. Her story is a constantly moving target. It never stays the same. Mr. Depp owns his mistake. He owns all of them. You saw him do it on the stand in a raw and powerful way. But in this trial, Ms. Heard has been confronted with her lies and the damage she has caused, and she cannot take any responsibility for what she has done. And you've seen the story, her story, it doesn't hold up. You've watched her performance on the stand. You saw her get caught in lie after lie. The time has come for those lies to come to an end. The time has come for you, the jury, to decide the truth. I started this trial giving you an opening statement, and I said to you that words matter. And this case is about Ms. Heard's words, the words she published in an op-ed about Mr. Depp. Ms. Heard and her attorneys have talked a lot about this in this trial about the First Amendment. They've talked about the importance of free speech, and we agree. I'm a lawyer. Of course I agree with that. But the First Amendment doesn't protect lies that hurt and defame people. And there's a difference. Ms. Heard has no right to tell the world that Mr. Depp physically or sexually assaulted her when that isn't true. That's not protected speech. Our US Constitution doesn't protect that speech. And it is a core value of American society that you are innocent until proven guilty. There is a presumption of innocence in this country. A person's life cannot and should not be destroyed by a baseless charge and no opportunity to defend yourself. That's why Mr. Depp had to bring this claim. Ms. Heard was never going to stop calling him an abuser. The only way to clear his name was to stand up in this court, where both sides are bound by the same rules of American law. A jury would be tasked, you, ladies and gentlemen, would be tasked with deciding once and for all Ms. Heard's lies could be exposed in a fair and impartial process. When Mr. Depp sued her, Ms. Heard apparently decided she needed to sue him back. And because there were no statements made by Mr. Depp on which she could base a claim, she sued him based on statements made by one of his lawyers, Adam Waldman, calling Ms. Heard's accusations of abuse a hoax. Make no mistake, though, they are a hoax. Ms. Heard made up claims of abuse, and then she gave a performance where she passionately repeated those made-up claims of abuse on the stand in front of each of you. But ask yourselves, who's really the one alleging a hoax here? Who wants you to believe that everyone else is lying, committing perjury? Ms. Heard needs you to believe that all the people who showed up in this courtroom to testify on behalf of Mr. Depp, they're all lying. She needs you to believe that the witnesses you heard from, including security professionals, former cops, medical professionals, and police officers, they're all lying, covering up for Mr. Depp. She's asking you to believe that she's the one telling the truth and that the rest of the people in Mr. Depp's life are all part of a conspiracy of silence. This case is not just about whether you believe Mr. Depp or you believe Ms. Heard. This case is about whether you believe Ms. Heard or whether you believe Mr. Depp, Christy Dombrowski, who, yes, is here, supporting her brother. Isaac Baruch, who wept in front of the world. Keenan Wyatt, who doesn't work for Mr. Depp. Sean Betts, a former LA Sheriff's Department. Malcolm Connolly, he worked in the prisons in the UK. Starling Jenkins, a former US Marine. Travis McGivern, also another former police officer. Ben King, he worked for the Queen of England. David Kipper, Dr. David Kipper. Ms. Heard's doctor. And yes, Mr. Depp's doctor. Debbie Lloyd, a nurse. Aaron Filati, Ms. Heard's personal nurse. Officer Sines, an LA police officer with training in domestic violence. Officer Haddon, her understudy, yes, in his first week, studying to pick up on these signs of domestic abuse. Officer Gatlin, Brandon Patterson, who worked at Eastern Columbia Building, Kate James, Ms. Heard's former personal assistant, Tara Roberts, Alejandro Romero. He took his deposition from his car because he had to go to work, but it didn't stop him from telling the truth. Edward White, Mr. Depp's business manager. Laura Wasser, one of the most famous divorce lawyers in California. Morgan Knight. Beverly Leonard. Morgan Tremaine. And Kate Moss. And all the other witnesses whose stories support Mr. Depp's description of what took place. These people have nothing to gain by coming forward. They have everything to lose. You have seen Mr. Waldman's statements and evidence in this case. When you look at them, you can tell that the key point Mr. Waldman was making in each of these statements was simply that Ms. Heard's accusations against Mr. Depp were lies. That's why he talks about an abuse hoax. Now, Ms. Heard has the burden of proof of proving that Mr. Waldman's statements are false. And that means that Ms. Heard has to do more than prove that Mr. Waldman got some details wrong. She has to prove that Mr. Waldman's statements are false in their essential meaning. In other words, she has to prove that her abuse claims are not a hoax. But as we've seen, the evidence is overwhelming that Ms. Heard's claims of abuse are false. We should also spend a bit of time talking about actual malice. It is Ms. Heard's burden to prove that Mr. Waldman's statements were made with actual malice. And actual malice means knowledge that the statements were false or reckless, and that's an important word, reckless disregard for the truth. But here, there is clear evidence that Mr. Waldman genuinely believed that Ms. Heard had committed a hoax. You watched him give the testimony by deposition in this case. He testified about the evidence he found persuasive, the numerous witnesses and the sworn depositions of the police officers who went to the penthouses that night and again saw no injuries. There is no evidence in this record, none, that Mr. Waldman acted with actual malice. He believed Mr. Depp. He believed the record. It's also important to understand that because Mr. Waldman's statements were not made by Mr. Depp, Ms. Heard needs to prove that Mr. Waldman was acting as Mr. Depp's agent. And within the scope of that agency, within the scope of the agency of the employment, when he made the statements, Mr. Waldman is a lawyer. Ms. Heard has not presented evidence that making those statements was part of Mr. Waldman's responsibilities as Mr. Depp's lawyer. There's nothing in the record. Ms. Heard is also claiming to be suffering from PTSD and claims that she has something to do with Mr. Waldman's statements. Ms. Heard wants you to believe that she suffers from PTSD because Mr. Depp purportedly abused her. But as usual, Ms. Heard is not telling the truth. As you heard from Dr. Shannon Curry, Ms. Heard does not have PTSD, and she does not act like a person with PTSD. Ms. Heard is an actress in a major film, involved in sommelier training. She just had a baby. Dr. Curry also found that Ms. Heard attempted to grossly exaggerate her symptoms during testing, which is a sign of malingering, or said differently, of Ms. Heard lying. Ms. Heard hired Dr. Don Hughes to help her with this narrative. Dr. Hughes did not catch Ms. Heard's exaggeration during testing because Dr. Hughes used an improper malingering screen test. She wasn't going to find it. One that is meant to identify an examinee's attempt to fake a severe mental illness or psychosis, not PTSD. Dr. Hughes diagnosed Ms. Heard with PTSD without administering the gold standard diagnostic test used for PTSD. She diagnosed her, think about that, she diagnosed her with PTSD before administering the test she admitted was the gold standard. 2 years after diagnosing Ms. Heard with PTSD, and curiously, shortly after Dr. Curry administered the gold standard diagnostic test in her evaluation of Ms. Heard, but before it was disclosed, Dr. Hughes decided to administer the gold standard, finally. Nevertheless, even after Dr. Hughes used the proper test, there were a number of deficiencies in her administration of that test. You saw them, including her failure to even follow the instructions that render her diagnoses unreliable. Ms. Heard's claim for monetary damages related to Mr. Waldman's statements, frankly, it's a fantasy. Ms. Heard speculates wildly that she has somehow been damaged by Mr. Waldman's statements. But in reality, Ms. Heard has not shown any damage at all that was because of or by Mr. Waldman's statements. There is evidence of a mountain of negative press coverage about Ms. Heard, including press reports about her defecating in Mr. Depp's bed, cutting off his finger, and putting out a cigarette on his face. But none of that has anything to do with Mr. Waldman's statements. And Ms. Heard has presented no evidence, none, of any film or other project that she has lost because of the statements. In fact, you heard from Warner Brothers president, Walter Hamada, who explained that Ms. Heard suffered no loss, none. No loss of compensation or other adverse effect on her major film, Aquaman 2. You heard it straight from him. Ms. Heard's expert, Katherine Arnold, testified, but for the statements from Mr. Waldman, Ms. Heard would be much more successful in her career. To form this opinion, Ms. Arnold compares Ms. Heard to actors such as Jason Momoa, the actual Aquaman, Chris Pine, Gal Gadot, and Zendaya. But as Richard Marx, who does deals every day, that's his job, not testifying here for a paycheck, does deals in Hollywood, and Doug Banya both testified that these actors are simply not comparable to Ms. Heard. After all, Jason Momoa, he was Aquaman. Chris Pine, he was Captain Kirk. Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman. Zendaya, she's been acting since she was 13 years old on the Disney Channel. And she's in every single Spider-Man movie. Further, the Q scores of these actors are not at all comparable with Ms. Heard's Q scores. As Mr. Banya testified, Ms. Heard's rating was less compared to these actors, and all of Ms. Heard's Q scores ratings were less favorable than the average of all performers. As you heard from Michael Spindler, because Ms. Arnold relies on the salaries of these comparable actors to calculate Ms. Heard's damages, Ms. Heard's claim for damages makes no sense. There's no connection. Further, and more fatally for Ms. Heard's damages claim, is that there's no connection to the Waldman statements, to Mr. Waldman's statements. Even if you find damage to her career, you have to connect it to the defamatory statements. There is no connection. Mr. Banya testified that all the negative tweets that Ms. Heard has entered into evidence have no causal connection to the statements underlying Ms. Heard's counterclaims. Specifically, Ms. Heard's expert, Mr. Ron Schell, presented a flawed methodology that included picking out hashtags at random, including justice for Johnny Depp. What does that have to do with the Waldman statements? And counting accompanying tweets, even though it had nothing to do with Mr. Waldman. Ms. Heard's counterclaim is based on statements by Mr. Waldman, not Mr. Depp. Ms. Heard knows perfectly well that she hasn't suffered any damages from those statements, buried at the bottom of articles in a mere tabloid, the Daily Mail. And the statements are substantially true, since all they do really is point out that Ms. Heard's abuse allegations are false. Ms. Heard's counsel argued that Ms. Heard did not write the title of the online version of the op-ed, which stated, "I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. That has to change." does not matter whether or not Ms. Heard wrote the title. You will recall from the court's instructions this morning that what matters is whether Ms. Heard republished the defamatory language. That instruction states in part that you should find Ms. Heard republished this article if she, quote, retransmitted the defamatory material with the goal of achieving a new audience. Stated differently, republication occurs when the speaker has affirmatively, that's important, affirmatively reiterated the statement. Ms. Heard affirmatively reiterated the statement. She posted it on her Twitter. If we could please pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 3. This is the tweet Ms. Heard sent. She retweeted the Washington Post tweet to a new audience, her own Twitter followers. And she affirmatively reiterated the statement by proudly declaring, "Today I published this op-ed in the Washington Post." She didn't quibble with the title. She said proudly, "Today I published this op-ed in the Washington Post." The title of the op-ed was prominently displayed in the tweet. That is enough for you, members of the jury, to find that Ms. Heard republished the title of the op-ed and adopted the statement as her own. She can and should be held liable and responsible for that statement. Ms. Heard tries to make something out of the fact that Mr. Waldman reported her to law enforcement in Los Angeles for perjury after her allegations of abuse were made against Mr. Depp. But I'll submit to you that all this proves is that Mr. Waldman believes Ms. Heard has committed perjury. Mr. Ronborn argued that the lack of supporting evidence for Ms. Heard's allegations of horrendous, constant abuse is somehow not something to be considered, that it is shameful for you to consider the fact that she didn't document all the terrible injuries that she claims to have suffered. That is a twisted argument. First, you know, because you have seen and listened to Ms. Heard in action, that Ms. Heard is a woman who's documenting things throughout the relationship. And it is instructive that the things she chose to document had nothing to do with violence. She documented Mr. Depp sleeping. She documented lines of cocaine, featuring prominently Mr. Depp's loan-out company or production company, Infinitum. Stage photographs, that's what she documented. Mr. Rottenborn's entire argument assumes that Mr. Depp, a man, should be disbelieved because despite the fact that Ms. Heard can't support her accusations with actual evidence. What we have put to you, the jury, is not that because Ms. Heard didn't take enough pictures or tell people about abuse that it didn't happen. What we have put to you is that given how brutal and constant the abuse Ms. Heard claims, she would have had serious injuries. That's a fact. She would have had serious injuries that would have been observable in the pictures we looked at and by the witnesses we heard from, and would have required medical attention. That's it. Ms. Heard testifies to injuries that multiple people didn't see. What you have in the end is Ms. Heard's word. Do you trust it? We are not here because Ms. Heard told the world Mr. Depp was verbally abusive. This is not about the words used by Mr. Depp. We are here because Ms. Heard told the world that Mr. Depp was physically and sexually abusive. That's what Ms. Heard was saying in the op-ed. On May 27th, exactly 6 years ago today, 2016, Ms. Heard walked into court with a mark on her face to tell the world that her husband was abusive. She renewed that falsehood in her op-ed, describing herself as a public figure representing domestic abuse. And she published the op-ed, including the title, claiming that she spoke up against sexual violence. Everyone knew who she was talking about when she used those words. She was alleging physical and sexual abuse. She was not alleging emotional or psychological abuse. She was alleging physical and sexual abuse. Ms. Heard cannot run away from her own allegations now. You have all heard the evidence of what she alleged against Mr. Depp in 2016. And you have all heard her incredibly dramatic, over-the-top story of physical and sexual abuse. That story was a defamatory lie. Ms. Heard tried to argue that you only need to find that Mr. Depp might have touched Ms. Heard once in order to find in her favor, because that makes her a victim of abuse. But common sense should tell you that you can't pick and choose Ms. Heard's allegations. You saw her on the stand. We all did. She gave the performance of her life, telling you story after story of abuse. And not just any abuse, but extravagant, over-the-top allegations of abuse that would be truly brutal, horrific, if true. You either believe all of it, or you believe none of it. Either she's telling the truth, including in her most extreme allegations, or she's lying. Either she was raped by a bottle, or she's the sort of person who would get on the stand in this courtroom and lie to you and the world about being raped. And if she would lie about that, what wouldn't she lie about? You can't find that Mr. Depp hit her once. Either he hit her countless times, or you can't believe a single word that comes out of her mouth. And what is the actual meaning of Ms. Heard's op-ed? That's an important question. It's not that Mr. Depp said a nasty word to her once. It's not that Mr. Depp might have hit her once. It's that she is a representative of domestic abuse. And by extension, Mr. Depp is a representative of abuse perpetrators. Words matter. Ms. Heard has shown you a lot of text messages from Mr. Depp with some very vivid language. As I told you at the start of this trial, Mr. Depp has a unique style of writing. He uses words I don't use. And you probably don't use either. But as you also heard during this trial, Mr. Depp writes in that way, in part because he modeled his writings on literary giants like Hunter S. Thompson. And he's got a dark sense of humor. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's who he is. And Mr. Depp owns text messages. He acknowledges that he said those things, and he said things that he shouldn't have. But using bad language and colorful humor does not mean that you are a violent abuser. And ironically, as much as Ms. Heard is trying to use Mr. Depp's words against him, it is Ms. Heard who repeatedly admitted to violence. In her own words. You've heard the tapes. You've heard her admit to violence. Ms. Heard can try to distract you with text messages showing that Mr. Depp uses bad language and has a dark sense of humor. But none of that, I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, none of that is evidence of abuse. Hitting your husband is evidence of abuse. Mr. Ronborn talked about the burden of proof. Let's talk about that for a minute. Mr. Depp only has to show that it is more likely than not, that the statements in the op-ed are false, that it is more likely than not that they have a defamatory implication, that it is more likely than not that Ms. Heard designed and intended the statements to refer to Mr. Depp. And the evidence on these points is clear. Ms. Heard made these allegations 6 years ago today, May 27th, 2016. She went out of her way to make them public, tipping off TMZ. When she published the op-ed, she was reminding everyone in Hollywood and the world of her abuse claims. And those claims are a lie. Consider what the true purpose of the article. Mr. Ronborn said it was to promote legislative reforms. But what was it actually? The evidence shows it was to promote Ms. Heard. It was timed to be released at the same time as Aquaman on December 21st, 2018. And it was timed to coincide with her announcement of her ambassadorship at the ACLU for women's rights. That's not a coincidence. It was designed that way. That was not a statement about legislative reforms. This was about burnishing Ms. Heard's reputation at the expense of Mr. Depp's. It was about Ms. Heard continuing to portray herself as a heroic survivor of abuse. And on the question of actual malice, that just means whether or not Ms. Heard knew the allegations were false. Ms. Heard knows perfectly well that she wasn't abused. She has direct knowledge of that. She was in that relationship. So actual malice is easily established. You may have noticed that no one showed up for Ms. Heard in this courtroom other than her sister. Every other witness who traveled to Virginia for her was a paid expert. This is a woman who burns bridges. Her close friends don't show up for her. Mr. Rottenborn tried to discredit Mr. Depp's witnesses by suggesting they're all on Mr. Depp's payroll. So he doubled down on the hoax theory, that everyone's just lying. First of all, it's not even true Keenan Wyatt is on his payroll. Ben King isn't on his payroll. Officer Melissa Sines isn't on his payroll. Morgan Tremaine isn't on his payroll. Officer Tyler Haddon, he's not on his payroll. Beverly Leonard, Alejandro Romero, Brandon Patterson, Morgan Knight, none of those people are on his payroll. And Kate Moss is most definitely not on Mr. Depp's payroll. Ms. Heard wants you to believe that all these people are lying. Let's talk about the Boston plane. Ms. Heard wants you to believe that the recording you heard is from the Boston plane flight. But that's quite telling. What did Ms. Heard capture of this supposed rampage? Mr. Depp moaning in distress? That's what she chose to record. What sort of person records something like that? What sort of person takes pictures of their husband or boyfriend or fiance who's struggling with sobriety, nodding off with ice cream dripping down his leg, his hand in his pocket, or asleep on the ground? What sort of person does that? Definitely not someone that's afraid of him. And Ms. Heard's attorney told a story of May 21 that was completely, utterly inconsistent with the testimonies of Officers Sines and Haddon, who testified clearly that they saw no signs of injury, no sign of property damage. And she told a story about how Officer Sadanaga's testimony was also wrong. She testified that the report was only required in case of a crime. Ms. Heard's attorneys tried to tell you that Mr. Depp apologized on May 22nd because he had hit Ms. Heard. Mr. Depp didn't apologize to Ms. Heard on May 22nd for hitting her. He apologized because he was leaving Ms. Heard. And this was a woman that, in spite of all her violence and all her rage, Mr. Depp, he loved her. He had been with her for years. Of course he apologized when he finally broke it off. Ms. Bredehoff also tried to tell you that Ms. Heard did everything in her power to keep the authorities away and to not get Mr. Depp in trouble on May 21st, 2016. Take a minute and think back to what Ms. Heard did 6 days later, 6 years ago today. She walked into court with a visible mark on her face, not wearing makeup that day. She tipped off TMZ, she made it public, and she showed up on the cover of People magazine with a mark on her face. Was that protecting Mr. Depp? Or was she trying to destroy him? Mr. Rottenborn asked you to consider why you're here. So why are you here? You're here because of a lie. And that was a lie that Ms. Heard repeated in the op-ed. At the start of this trial, we told you that this trial is about the evidence. The evidence overwhelmingly shows that Ms. Heard is an abuser and that she is a liar. She lied about Mr. Depp and took on the role of a lifetime as a public figure representing domestic abuse. What is her best evidence of that abuse? A video of Mr. Depp banging cabinets around. and text messages of Mr. Depp using bad words and dark, ugly humor, but never once admitting to abuse. Pictures of Mr. Depp sleeping. That's her best evidence. Ms. Heard herself. Ms. Heard held herself out to the world as a representative of abuse survivors everywhere, the face of the Me Too movement. This is not a Me Too situation. There are no Me Toos, just not me's. Ms. Heard does not deserve to be known as a representative of survivors of abuse, and Mr. Depp does not deserve to be known as a representative of perpetrators of abuse. That is what this case is about. It's not about money. It's about giving Mr. Depp his life back 6 years ago when she took it away. While you deliberate, ask yourselves why Mr. Depp would put himself through this. Expose every embarrassing detail of his life on national television. If he was guilty of anything that Ms. Heard accuses him of. We ask you, we implore you, to render a verdict for Mr. Depp. We ask you to set the record straight, that he is not the abuser she described, and that she is not the heroic survivor she portrayed. And we ask you to tell Ms. Heard that what she did was wrong. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. Rebuttal closing.
How about that?
Yes.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's interesting that in both their opening and their rebuttal closing, that you heard Mr. Depp's attorneys address none of Ms. Heard's witnesses. None of Ms. Heard's witnesses. They listed their own, who didn't see, who were on his payroll, weren't there behind closed doors with him, but they didn't address any of the witnesses. For example, Josh Drew, Rocky Pennington, Liz Mars, who were all there on May 21st, Melanie Iglesias, who covered Ms. Heard's bruises. They say that no one showed up for her. No one showed up for her, but then they say that these people aren't friends anymore. If they're not friends anymore, then why would they be doing what they would suggest are lying for her? Why would they be corroborating everything that she says? It's this simple. If you believe that Depp was abusive to Amber one time ever, in any of the various forms of abuse, not only physical, verbal, emotional, psychological, sexual, any of the ways of abuse, then your job is very easy. And you can not only deny Mr. Depp's claim, but you can fine for Amber on her counterclaim. And it's interesting that Ms. Vasquez just changed their theory after 6 weeks. She said, oh, well, domestic abuse just means physical abuse. It's not what Mr. Depp said. It's not what Dr. Curry said. It's not what Dr. Hughes said. It's not what you know to be true. You know that the evidence that you've seen constitutes all sorts of abuse. And there's a reason that they're running as fast as they can from those sorts of abuse, because they know that he did it. Now, the suggestion that Amber's abuse allegations are a hoax is vicious and vile. Mr. Depp can say whatever he wants now, but he can't change the evidence that you've seen at the trial. And the evidence shows that Ms. Heard did not commit abuse hoaxes, not about sexual violence, not about May 21st, 2016, and certainly not about Mr. Depp and Mr. Waldman's catch-all, all-purpose statement that Ms. Heard's abuse hoax, which suggests that every one of her allegations are false, that that's coming to an end. The evidence shows she did not commit any of those hoaxes. The evidence shows that she was abused exactly how not only she, but her witnesses supporting her claims say that she was, and their witnesses even, who claim that Mr. Depp abused her. Ms. Vasquez talked about actual malice. She says because Mr. Waldman was acting as Mr. Depp's agent, you have to look at Mr. Waldman. They're standing in the shoes of one another. And as Mr. Depp's agent, Mr. Depp's malice is Mr. Waldman's malice. Mr. Depp's malice is Mr. Waldman's malice. He acted with actual malice when he made these statements. Now, after years and years of Mr. Depp controlling the roles that Ms. Heard took, Ms. Heard had the biggest hit of her career 3 months before she was sued. She had withstood Mr. Depp's attempt to have her fired from Aquaman and his own jealousy as his career went down the drain before her op-ed for reasons having nothing to do with Ms. Heard. But once the lawsuit against Ms. Heard was filed, his campaign that he promised to destroy her entered a new phase. And then it reached a crescendo when Mr. Depp and Mr. Waldman decided to meet with the Daily Mail together and decide to plant statements that were defamatory of Ms. Heard in the spring of 2020, leading up to the UK trial. You've heard Amber and her agent, Jessica Kovachevich, talk about the impact to Amber's career. She can't get hired because of the negative treatment she gets. Studios like her, co-stars like her, she tests well, but she can't get opportunities because of the negativity associated with Mr. Depp and Mr. Waldman. You heard Amber Heard on the stand yesterday telling you exactly what she has experienced as a result of Mr. Depp's promise to bring her global humiliation. That promise, to paraphrase Katherine Arnold, Ms. Heard's damages expert, that promise was a spark. And that promise he kept because he had told her again and again, the only way out of this is death. And when she chose a different path out of it, he decided to make that promise. He decided to throw that spark. And when Mr. Waldman became involved, that spark became a forest fire. That forest fire has continued to this day. We ask, ladies and gentlemen, that you hold Mr. Depp accountable for his actions. Stand up for victims of domestic abuse everywhere who suffer in silence. Stand up for the freedom of speech, the freedom to speak about your life that the First Amendment protects. Give Amber Heard her voice back. Give Amber Heard her life back. Thank you so much for your service on this jury.
Thank you, Mr. Rottenborn. Members of the jury, this is an important case to both the plaintiff and the defendant. In order to reach a verdict, each of you must agree on that verdict. In other words, your verdict must be unanimous. The first thing you should do when you go back to the jury room is to select a presiding juror. The role of the presiding juror is to see to it that the deliberations are conducted in an orderly and businesslike manner, that they are conducted only in the jury room when all the members of the jury are present, and that each juror has the opportunity to fully and fairly express his or her views. It is rarely helpful for jurors upon first entering the jury room to take a straw vote, or for any juror to make an emphatic expression of his or her opinion in the case, or to announce a determination to stand for a certain verdict. To do so before all jurors have had an opportunity to consult with one another and exchange views and opinions might allow your sense of pride to prevent you from retreating from an announced position, even when shown that such position is unsound. You have a duty to consult with one another and to deliberate with the objective of reaching an agreement, if it can be done without offending your individual judgment. Each of you must decide this case for yourself, but only after an impartial consideration of the evidence with your fellow jurors. In the course of deliberation, a juror should not hesitate to re-examine his or her views and change his or her opinion if convinced it is an error. However, none of you should surrender your honest conviction as to the weight or effect of the evidence solely because of the opinion of your fellow jurors or for the mere purpose of returning a verdict. In the jury room, you will have the exhibits that were entered into evidence. You will also have the instructions of law that I just read to you, and you will have the verdict forms. You'll also have a laptop, and that laptop will have just 2 files on it, and Deputy Lusa will set it up for you in the jury room. One is the plaintiff's files for audio and video files, and one's the defendant's files for audio and video files, and you'll be able to hear and watch those as well, the ones that were submitted into evidence. During your deliberations until you are discharged from jury service, you must not communicate with or provide any information to anyone who is not a member of this jury by any means about this case. You may not use any electronic device or media to conduct any independent research about this case, the legal or factual issues in the case, and the individuals or attorneys involved in the case. You're not permitted to consult dictionaries or reference materials, search the internet, visit websites or blogs, or use any other tools to obtain information about this case or to help you decide the case. Do not try to find out information from any source outside of the testimony and the exhibits received as evidence during the trial. You will also have, I know the attorneys discussed briefly about the verdict forms. You'll have two sets of verdict forms, one for Mr. Depp's case and one for Ms. Heard's case, okay? Now, when you have these verdict forms, the first 3 pages of both verdict forms have each of the statements separately, okay? So when you're going through it, you're going to look at each statement separately and answer the questions that are on the page, okay? Now, if you decide yes for every question for a statement, then that's when you go to the last page of the verdict form, which is for damages. So, for example, if you find yes for all of statement 1, then you could go to 4 and 5 for damages. If you find yes for all of statement 1 and statement 2, you still go to 4 and 5 for damages. If you say yes for statement 1, statement 2, and statement 3, you obviously go to 4 and 5 for damages. If you answer no on any of the pages for any of the statements, you don't go to 4 and 5, okay? So that will be for all of them. And then when you do come to a verdict, make sure the foreperson signs it and dates it, and then just let the deputy know about that, okay? All right, now, for the tough part, you may remember at the beginning of this case, I told you we would randomly select 4 people to be the alternates, okay? We still have 2 alternates left. And the numbers were placed in an envelope from the very beginning of the case. So let me just say before I release the alternates that I know that this trial has been a huge sacrifice.
I'm Terry Austin, and you're watching Law&Crime.
Hi, it's me again. Listen to this. Medicare Part C plans with extra benefits like getting money added back to your Social Security check every month may now be available to you in your zip code. Make sure you're not missing out. It's simple. 1, call the number on your screen. 2, they'll look up your zip code and see if you're eligible. 3, they'll check for plans with extra benefits like prescriptions, dental coverage, and the benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every single month. Call now.
I called to get everything I deserve.
I called to check my zip code for a plan with the benefit that adds money back to my Social Security check.
I called to check my zip code.
Check your zip code. It could be dynamite. Call now.
Call 1-800-595-8348. That's 1-800-595-8348 now.
How can you perform like the world's greatest athletes?
With Mission, that's how.
Mission is the leader in cooling and heat relief innovations. Technology developed for elite athletes, now engineered into a full line of performance caps that will help you cool more, do more.
That is a game changer.
Heat will shut you down. Even just feeling warm can affect you. Mission caps are engineered with UPF 50 performance fabric and our breakthrough hydroactive cooling technology, now with 50% more cooling power. Activate with water, ring, and wave for cooling up to 30 degrees below your body temperature in under a minute. It's like your own climate control that lasts for hours. Thermal imagery shows an ordinary cap in 90-degree heat and an activated Mission Sprint cap. How can you do more when it's hot?
With Mission, that's how.
Go to Mission.com right now to get your own game-changing Mission performance cap starting as low as $19.99. For a limited time, use the promo code below to save 25% and get free shipping on all Mission cooling and heat relief innovations.
% of people have subscriptions they've forgotten about. Truebill helps you save money by finding recurring charges, notifying you when they're due, and easily canceling unwanted subscriptions. Download Truebill and take control of your money.
Letting go of my diamond ring was really hard, but selling it for the best price was simple with Worthy.com. They evaluate your jewelry to help you understand what it's actually worth. Then they auction it to their network of professional buyers. Get more for your jewelry with Worthy.com.
I love Simplify by Quicken. It shows me how much I'm spending and creates a personalized spending plan. I always know how much I can spend and save. How much more could you save? Take the Simplify challenge and find out. Named the best budgeting app by the New York Times Wirecutter. Start your free trial today.
Hair has always been central to my identity.
Once I started taking Nutrafol, I could see my hair get thicker.
It's also made my hair stronger.
Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement.
Start your hair growth journey at Nutrafol.com.
It wasn't Meta's fault that yo-yo dieting failed her. Calibrate works with her biology to end an unsustainable cycle. Medication, coaching, lifestyle tweaks. Lose at least 10% of your body weight or your money back. Join Calibrate.com.
What are my stats? Well, my investments are tracking up, my house will be paid off in 12 years, and I'll retire at 61. Take control of your finances with Quicken. Try risk-free for 30 days.